So it was for me.
Good. Okay, we will call the meeting to order. And Claire, may we have a roll call, please?
Linden? Here. Ashkenazi?
Here.
Kimura? DeGenero?
Here.
Lineski?
Here.
Cuccielli? Paramanica?
Here.
Chairwoman Beal?
Here. Okay, we'll stand and salute the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. The notice requirements of the open public meeting law for this meeting have been satisfied. A copy of the notice having been sent to the Asbury Park Press and the Coaster and filed in the office of the Township Clerk on July 21st, 2023. There is an emergency exit through the courtroom doors and 2 exits at the rear of the room. There will be no smoking. No new cases started after 10 o'clock p.m. and no new testimony taken after 10:30 p.m. In addition, normally the applicant will be limited to 45 minutes of testimony. All meetings will be video and audio taped and shown on the Township of Ocean's Community Cable Channel, Channel 22 on Verizon Fios, and Channel 77 on Cablevision. All cell phones must be turned off, or if you need to make a call, please make your call outside the meeting room. Our case this evening is Memo Investments, 44 Monmouth Road, Block 7, Lot 51 in the C1 zone, seeking to construct a 3-story building with 11 residential units, which will consist of 6 2-bedroom units and 5 3-bedroom units, as well as a basement with storage, gym, multi-purpose room, and utilities. Site improvements will include a total of 25 parking spaces, a playground area, lighting, landscaping, and signage. And the attorney is Jennifer S. Krimko.
Good evening, Madam Chair, members of the board. Jennifer Krimko from Ansel, Bermanera, on behalf of the applicant. Very briefly for you, and a couple of clarifications. So this is actually an amended application. This original application was submitted more than a year ago. It came in consistent with your conditional use standards for this zone. The C1 zone allows for an inclusionary or affordable housing component, residential mixed use with commercial on the first floor. We came in with a plan. There were some variances, but they were not necessarily significant. The issue that the board planner had more than anything was with regard to having trucks on site with the residential neighborhood right behind us. He recognized that, and I'm only sharing this because I know Jim's not here, and I wanted you to have some of the history. He recognized that this zoning was put in place as a result of a affordable housing litigation and a settlement with the town, and this overlay was put on this property. He had advised, and I think he had put it in prior letters, it was never really intended for this lot or a lot of this size. This one just happened to fall under it. It was really intended more for Norwood Avenue. So we met with him at least 2, if not 3 times, as well as the board engineer, and I don't know if Colleen was saying that, he was then planning administrator, and we went through many different machinations of the plan. And he felt that, considering the residential behind us, that a full residential project would be far more amenable for a few reasons. One, there would be no trucks backing up at various hours that would serve any potential retail or restaurant that was there. There wouldn't be the same noise and other attendant issues that would normally go with having commercial development there. Well, the plans that you have before you do show a mix of bedrooms. Even though this is not a permitted use, meaning 100% residential, and it doesn't fall under the conditional use standards, which requires a set-aside of affordable housing, it does fall under your general affordable housing ordinance. And that does require either a 20% set-aside for sale or a 15% set-aside for rentals. In this particular case, as you're going to hear through the testimony, these are intended to be rental, and to that extent, we would be required to have 1.65 units as affordable units. I had the pleasure of speaking with Mary Beth Monaghan, who is the planner who promulgates all of the affordable housing in town, she's basically your COA planner. And she had indicated that, well, we can't do a payment in lieu and only construct one, we will be required to construct the two. She's the person who makes the decision with regard to bedroom mix and the like, and what's affordable, moderate, or very low affordable. And what she had indicated was that should we get an approval tonight, she would work with us on that. So as it relates to the affordable units, and that's why I'm giving you so much background on this, as it relates to affordable units, those bedroom mixes may change. Only because it's going to be subject to what the Township's affordable housing consultant wants in those units. And we really don't have a whole lot of control over that. It's ultimately going to be up to her for compliance. As it relates to the market rate units, that doesn't change. Secondly, and then I'm going to be quiet and let the professionals talk. Secondly, the plan that you have before you doesn't show the playground area. As you're going to hear, we did have an open space area on the plan. When we move the exhibits in, you're going to see that we're proposing a small playground area for the residents. We're showing what is some typical equipment in the play area. We would prefer to not have to come back for site plan approval each and every time a piece of equipment needs to be replaced. So we're asking is just for approval to have play equipment in that area, subject to all other codes and regulations, but not to be tied down to the pieces of equipment that are shown there, because depending on who's living in the units, maybe they're going to need some more top lot type things, or maybe some, more advanced. So with all of that as the background, and following the CME letter, I'd like to move it as A1, the preliminary final site plan revised through October 5th, 2023. A2, the architectural plan prepared by Brick City, revised through September 28th, 2023. A3 is the survey by Insight, revised through August 3rd, 2023. A4 is the operations and maintenance manual by Insight, revised through 10/5/23. And A5 is the stormwater management report, also by Insight, also at the same date of October 5th, 2023. Some additional exhibits is, and I have them to hand out, both the board, the public will have, the board, A6 is an aerial exhibit by Insight, dated February 16th, 2024, which I think was the original date we were scheduled to be heard. And this shows a color rendered overlay, of the development. A7 is just a close-up view of the color rendered overlay. And, you have yours to hand out, or no, you just have it on your own? Okay, but I won't go to this separately. The color renderings that we're going to present were actually part of the architectural plans moved in as A2, so she'll testify for that. So, and just so the public is aware, these are available for you. You're welcome to come up and get them. I'm sorry, I have to hand it out. So tonight, yes, I do see everybody here now. Tonight I have a professional engineer and planner who wears both hats. He's going to be testifying first, just as the engineer. We will then have our traffic engineer testify. We will then have our architect testify, and then we'll have Mr. Ward come back and provide the planning testimony. As you know, the planner can't really testify until all of the other witnesses had put in their testimony. So with your permission, I'd like to call Patrick Ward, have been qualified as an engineer and a planner, and get started.
Okay, Mr. Ward, if you can raise your right hand, do you affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth?
I do.
And you have testified before this board, and I'm assuming your credentials have not changed, so we
They have
will...
not. Still valid.
Okay.
Okay, well, you being the expert and the firm who prepared these plans, I'm going to let you walk the board. So why don't you start with the neighborhood, with the area one?
Sure.
I was just going to say, I'll let you take over, but
Yes, right.
not yet. All right, why don't you walk the board through what's existing there today, what we're proposing, grab that mic. and then let's talk about the compliance with the underlying zoning. Yes.
Okay. Okay.
And just so the public knows, this is just what we handed out to you on.
So subject property, I feel like I can hear myself, but okay,
Hold it closer in.
is 44 Monmouth Road, County Route 15. You can see where we are here. This is the neighborhood area on A6. North to south on the page is Monmouth Road. Here's West Park Avenue, and Park Avenue's down here. So where we are is just about across the street from the 7-Eleven, a couple lots north of West Park Avenue and the Monmouth Road intersection. What you can kind of see is how the layout of our property, which I'll get into, the nitty-gritty as we go through this, kind of sits along this corridor of Monmouth Road.
The commercial corridor.
The commercial corridor, yeah. And you can see it's fully developed, as we all know, with kind of a mix of commercial uses and mixed-use uses. A couple residential uses as well. Behind us to the west is residential zone, and that kind of carries through Monmouth Road. As you go north to south, we have the commercial mixed-use corridor, and then beyond that is single-family residential as you get to the west and also to the east.
And Pat, I'm sorry, I had put on the record, but just to clarify, this is the C1 zone, so this is a commercial zone where all the commercial uses are permitted, and I indicated that the mixed use is also conditionally permitted.
That's correct, yes. So we're in the C1 neighborhood commercial zone. There's a lot of commercial uses that are permitted here. So what I'll do is I'm going to now refer to A7, which is our zoomed-in color rendering of the site plan, just walk the board through what we're proposing. So right now, as you've driven, I'm sure you've driven by the site, often it's a vacant lot. Previously, it had a building on it with a driveway. That's been taken down and demolished. Right now, it's vacant and clear. Basically, the applicant is proposing a 3-story building on the southern side of the lot, kind of the center. And it's a 3-story multifamily building. So the building will have 11 units, and it's made up of 6 2-bedroom units and 5 3-bedroom units.
Subject, obviously, to change should we have to, based on the affordable housing requirements.
That's correct, right. So what we have coming off Monmouth Road on the north side of the property, we have our entrance driveway. We're proposing parking lot, as you can see, L-shaped here. Now it's different color pavements there. Small site ID sign. Some landscaping, which I'll get into in a little bit. Lighting, site lighting. The playground is a Crimco reference at the rear.
Let me, Pat, just to point out, what's before the board is a color-rendered version of what we submitted as A1, with a few modifications that were made in response to the board engineer and the board planner's review.
That's correct.
So, and again, you'll go through that in detail, but I just want the board to understand that this may look slightly different than the plans that we looked at as A1.
Right. And then we also have an underground stormwater management system, which I'll describe in a moment as well. This application, because it is solely multifamily, we're requesting a use variance. It doesn't have a retail component, as Ms. Crimco stated at the beginning. And this is not a principally or conditionally permitted use in the zone. We do, since we are on a county road to date, we do have conditional approval from Monmouth County Planning Board for the site development and the access on Monmouth Road.
And the only conditions are minor things like posting bonds and things of that nature.
Right. We're basically at the tail end. We met with just like we met with Mr. Hagan and the board professionals in advance of seeing the board here. We did the same with the county way back when we started.
And it required us to dedicate an easement for road widening to the county as well, isn't it?
That's correct. It's, it is an easement for future road widening, and we've accounted for that on our plans and in the plan set that you have in front of you in A1. So just touch on a couple of site related items. Utilities, all the public utilities are available on Monmouth Road, and we're proposing all new connections for the new building. For stormwater management, this is not at the level of a major development, which I'm sure you've heard for larger projects, but our goal here, and really what the township likes to enforce for something that doesn't reach the threshold of major development, is to reduce all runoff rates from the pre-existing conditions. Majority of the site drains to the northwest here. There's a low spot actually on the neighboring property. So what we're going to do is we're going to collect and mimic these drainage patterns. We're going to collect all the roof runoff and all the pavement runoff, and we have 2 permeable pavement areas with storage pits. And what that means is that we are collecting and infiltrating all the stormwater management all the stormwater, I should say, excuse me, on site. Very little is leaving the site. And actually, in our stormwater management report, we do identify in our table that we're significantly reducing all storms to the point of nearly completely, and very little is being discharged to the northwest.
And Pat, as it relates to Ben's letter, and Drew is here in support of Ben, we can comply with all of his comments as it relates to the stormwater, so we don't take issue with any of those.
That's correct. We have no issue with the CME review memo. We'll work with Ben's office as a condition of any approval as needed.
And I only mentioned the drainage, but that goes to the general comments, the lighting comments, the EV charging station comments, stormwater management, grading and utility, and the miscellaneous. We don't
Yeah, we
issue
took
with
no
anything.
exception to any of them. Correct.
Should the board approve this, we submit a revised plan addressing all of this to Ben's satisfaction.
Right. So, and we do have a traffic engineer here, but I want to just kind of introduce a couple thoughts to the board here about traffic. This application will result in less traffic than a conforming use in the C1 zone. So, as I mentioned, the C1 zone permits a list of commercial and retail uses that are, quite frankly, a higher traffic generator than what we're proposing here.
And potentially more trucks as well.
And more trucks, yes, not only just passenger vehicles, but trucks. So what we have here is a three-story building. What would be permitted here would be a three-story building, 2 floors of residential above, commercial on the ground floor. Traffic from that type of building would be higher than what we're proposing here for just the 11 units. We talked about the trucks, that we were trying to avoid trucks here from the backing up, the beeping of the trucks, and any deliveries. There are medical and dental offices permitted in the zone. They're typically the highest traffic generators, and again, we're not proposing that here, we're proposing solely the 11 residential units.
And Pat, there's actually a doctor's office right next to us to the
Just
north.
to the north, right here at the top.
And to the south of us is retail.
There's retail down to the corner, yep. Okay, so for parking, and this kind of ties also in with traffic and the intensity of the use, by ordinance, this type of development would require 19 parking spaces. So that's about 1.75 parking spaces per unit. By the residential site improvement standards, 22 parking spaces are required. Then we have the EV credit, which was identified in the CME memo. That would actually result in a reduction of the required parking by 2, so it would get us to 20 parking spaces. So on the whole, 20 spaces are required. What we're proposing is 25, so we're actually providing 5 extra. The reason is we wanted to account for visitor spaces. We had, as you can see, we had the area to do it, we feel, and we feel that was important because there's no on-street parking anywhere in the vicinity.
Right, and let me just, and John Ray can speak to it later. We want to provide more visitor parking than RESIS requires, because the RESIS parking standards takes into account the 0.5 space per unit.
That's
So it's
correct.
already taken into, so RESIS only would require us to have a total of 22 spaces, but we're adding 3 extra spaces over RESIS altogether.
Correct, right. So we have an abundance of spaces and above and beyond what the RSIS requires for visitor space.
And we will provide the EV charging stations and/or make ready
We will,
as per the ordinance.
yep, as required.
Let's move on to loading.
So loading, township ordinance for use like this, strictly multifamily, strictly residential, doesn't require a loading space. Regardless, we have designed the site to accommodate a trash truck, which is really the only truck that we anticipate entering this site.
And one of the things that, just so the board understands how much Jim was really looking out for everybody, was one of the things that Jim had a concern with in the commercial scenario was a big trash enclosure, which would have to go in the northwest corner, which would have the greatest impact on the neighbors. In our proposed condition, how are we going to handle trash?
Yeah, so that's a great point. So what we have here on the north side of the building, about halfway back, you see it on the architectural plans, but we also show it on our plans, is a trash room. And there's a kind of covered, I don't want to say indent on the building, and apologize to the architect in advance on that, but that's where we're going to access that. And when I say we, I mean the private hauling company that would come and visit the site at the hours. Because it's a private hauler, we can work what hours they come, how often they come, and what they actually do to actually collect the trash. So we anticipate the truck enters the site, stops, the workers will enter the trash room, which will have its own dedicated entrance, not for the next pull out the cans that you can see on the architect's plans, unload the trash, and then the truck can turn around. That's the beauty of this L-shaped parking lot we have. We have enough room to turn around and get out to Monmouth Road.
And importantly, the backing up is away from the neighbors, so any development's gonna have a trash truck, but the way we set it up, the backing up would be away from the neighbors. And then we're not going to have any trash or recycling left outside in any congregate area.
Right, yeah, so you know, typical of any other commercial site plan, you have a trash enclosure which maybe goes beyond its enclosure. We have a trash room that's fully enclosed. You're not gonna see any cans or any dumpsters outside the building.
Okay. And what about lighting?
So lighting, the goal of site design lighting, as it always is with when we do it, is to light the important areas. The driveway, your parking lot, the walkways on site. We don't have time, but I'll get into that. And really the rear yard area where you'll have people that enter the site using the site. So we feel like we've accomplished the goal of providing safe and adequate lighting with one pole-mounted light near the driveway. It's only 16 feet high. That illuminates really one of the critical areas on site, and 4 building-mounted lights. And they're going to be 12 feet high. All buildings are LED lights, and they're all downward facing. The most common standard for maximum permissible light spillage is half a foot candle at the property lines. Our lighting plan does indicate 0.1 foot candle at the northwest corner of the subject property, and that's adjacent to one of our residential neighbors. But one of the things we noticed in advance of this hearing that we didn't include the evergreen trees, which we'll get into in a moment, the buffer plantings that we're proposing in our model. Those trees, when they grow or when they're planted, will shield that 0.1 foot candle. So really, we have no spillage. We feel that we have no light spillage, and we'll be happy to demonstrate that as a condition of approval to the engineer.
And Patrick, because this is not a single-family home, and because it's subject to a site plan, the landscaping that's being proposed is going to be required and will have to be maintained, or else we'd be in violation of our site plan.
Yes.
So those trees will always be there.
Yeah, they're, as approved, they're forced to remain in perpetuity or be replaced. We do have a few design waivers required for the lighting design. And again, our goal here was to minimize the number of fixtures but still provide safe and adequate lighting. We have 0.4 foot candles as a minimum in the parking area, where 0.6 is required. In our opinion, 0.4 is adequate. Sometimes the standard is 0.3 or 0.5. But in a small parking lot like this, 0.4 is appropriate.
And that also doesn't take into account any lighting in the area.
Correct. It does
So
not.
any street lighting or any lighting from the neighboring
More
properties wouldn't be taken into account. It's as if it was a dark world.
Yeah, this is our lighting analysis in a vacuum here, looking at 44 miles only. We have the average to minimum lighting uniformity ratio waiver, and then we have the max to min parking area lighting uniformity ratio, 13.5, where less than 10 is required.
And those are kind of technical, and the board is, this board and the planning board have routinely granted it because it's nearly impossible to meet it to a T.
Yeah, in order to meet those standards, we would need more fixtures, lower fixtures, lighter, we'll say softer fixtures, but more of them. We're trying to get this is a smaller property, right? We acknowledge that. Trying to achieve the safe and adequate lighting design with 5 fixtures, 4 of which are on a building. So we feel like we've achieved that. And again, the goal is to minimize impacts to our neighbors. Not so much Monmouth Road here, but off to the west behind us. We don't want them to see the spillage. We don't want to see them to even see the glare of the lights. In terms of landscaping, we had a landscape architect prepare a new landscape plan for the project. So, as you can see here, we have a lot of plants, along this entire side of Monmouth Road, coming around the north side, and of course, circling around the back and the rear. It's a total of 412 new plants. The goal here was to provide an attractive streetscape, so we have some trees framing in this front parking area, frame in the play area, as you can see at the rear, and then also to provide a buffer to our neighbors at the rear. We feel like we've been able to accomplish these goals with the 412 plants in half an acre.
And when you say plants, that includes trees.
Trees, shrubs, yep, everything. In Mr. Higgins' review memo, he did suggest, this is one of the site plan changes, he suggested he had a concrete walkway around the building, and we had that for egress from the building, but also circulation for pedestrians. We're going to propose that all as pavers, decorative pavers, as Mr. Higgins had suggested. So this exhibit shows that, and the revised site plan in the future will show that as well. As I mentioned earlier, we're providing a freestanding site ID sign near the driveway on the north side. It's fully conforming. And then we also have a building ID sign that we're proposing. That's also conforming.
and those you'll be able to see on the electric.
Correct.
So recognizing that you're going to go into all the variance really when you put your planning hat back on after we hear the other witnesses, are there any questions relating to the engineering testimony just offered? Recognizing we have a traffic engineer and an architect still to come.
Where's the trash thing again?
The trash room's right here. There's a little bit of a, it's not an overhang, there's an...
Alcove.
Alcove, perfect. Where there's a dedicated entrance from the parking lot to the trash room. And then, of course, the tenants can get to the trash room from the
So the
inside.
dumpster will be inside?
There's not going to be a dumpster, there will be cans.
Can't.
Yeah, trash and recycling cans. With the 11 units, we feel that we have enough room in there and cans to accommodate the use.
And does that go to the mailroom? Am I reading this correctly?
They're separate, but there's a corridor that leads directly to the outside from the internal lobby area. You can access the mailroom from that corridor and the trash room. So when residents have to take out their trash, they're taking it downstairs to the trash room and then depositing it there.
You mentioned the road will be widened. Is that,
No, it's not going to be widened. The county required us to dedicate an easement in case they widen it.
okay.
We're not widening the road as part of this in any way, shape, or form.
And the easement lines are the white lines on the plan, I'm assuming?
That was
No,
one
there is,
question.
on our site plan, it's probably easier to see, but there's a hashed area across the front that's 5 feet wide. There's actually going to be, what it'll look like in reality is a 5-foot wide grass strip, because we can't put plants in there. So you'll see back a sidewalk, a nice 5-foot lawn strip, and then the planting.
Yeah.
But again, we're not dedicating it, so it will stay part of our property, and that was one of the things that we requested from the county, and they granted us that waiver.
I just wanted to see where the easement was called out on it.
Can you show him? that-
Got it. Oh, you got it.
And it's just here, if it were to be put to use, it wouldn't be on the entire lot. It's just,
So what I can say is very simply is that they're entitled to take it anywhere they want, if they're eminent domain. It may be that they already have either dedications or easements, because anytime someone comes in for any kind of development application, they require it. So if they don't have it and they want to widen the road, they're going to just take it. But again, I don't know that they're widening the road. This is just something, they have a master plan, which, like you guys have a master plan with roadlets, theirs is the same, in any application you go, you have to give it.
Any other?
Yeah, so explain the drainage to me again. So I understand the whole basin, and I understand all that, but the permeable, the non-permeable pavement is going to drain to the permeable pavement? Is that, so you have a high spot in the corner or someplace and it drains towards the non-permeable?
Yeah.
To the permeable pavement?
Right, so it's somewhat, I'm trying to keep it simple, like as you enter here, this is like a ridge in the property line, but not much of the property drains to Monmouth Road.
That's kind of what I was asking, is, are you draining anything to Monmouth Road, or is everything draining back into the property?
Very little, like the crosswalk area, for example, right? So then the rest is heading in this northwest direction along the curb line, and it's draining right towards permeable.
How does the overflow work? The overflow is done with the inlets?
Yes, yeah, so there's an inlet at the corner here, that acts as our emergency overflow. In the event that
There's a flow. It can't drain through the pavement, it goes through the inlet and goes into the ground that
Right, and
way.
there's also provisions in the BMP manual does require, if the surface actually clogs, right? We have inlets that allow for the surface runoff to be, but injected into the storage bed and then infiltrated, just like you'd see with any other system that's underground. And then this front system is kind of in its own area here that collects its own surface runoff. A portion of the roof heads here, and a portion of the roof goes directly into this.
And Pat, one of the things that we moved into evidence, and I know you know this, but I just want the public to know, is the operation manual, which will require you to submit, it gets reviewed by the board engineer, and then it has to be implemented, and it actually gets recorded against the property in deed.
Correct. Yeah, so this pavement cannot be replaced with your standard pavement in the future if they wanted to repave it. Then there will be issues. Yep.
And it also includes what they have to do by way of maintenance.
Yeah, there's periodic maintenance, annual maintenance that are even more frequent.
And it's only staying there for like 72 hours in the
It has to drain down, yep.
72 hours.
That's a state rule. There's inspection ports that we have so you could actually see how that's functioning. for when it is inspected.
And is there still a basement?
There is a basement, yeah, there is a basement.
Yeah, and the architect will go through all of that.
Any other questions from board members? Okay.
Any questions from the public? Before?
Yes, let's take them now, since they're fresh. Any questions for Mr. Ward? If you can come to the microphone and state your name and your address.
My name is Robert Tucker. I live at 100 Marston Place for the last 21 years.
Robert, can you just play listening?
T-O-P-E-R. So is there any kind of gate to this property? I heard at one point that was part of a plan to put a gate across the parking lot entrance.
No, we don't have any gate proposed here, and I don't believe it would be permissible. We do have a fence along the rear.
It was never, yeah, I don't think it was ever part of any of the plan.
Yeah, no, so we can't have, so there is no gate proposed.
The county wouldn't allow it because then people would back up into the county trying to get in the property. So
Yeah.
it would never happen.
Sure.
Any other questions for Mr. Ward from the public? Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, Mr. Pavlik.
Your engineer.
Yeah, I had a couple of questions for Mr. Ward. I know you said you would comply with all the conditions in our letter. I just wanted to see what would be addressed specifically.
Sure.
Most of these are technical, the technical warning surfaces being installed at the curb ramp for ADA spots.
Sure, yep, no problem.
Okay. Parking, you know, through that, and EV, and green spaces, you agree to that? Landscaping and lighting. You requested a few waivers, B1, condition, this might just be a rounding issue with the lighting plan. 0.06 foot candles is required, 0.1 is shown on the plan. If that could be addressed, or
Point,
You mentioned .4.
is that the light spillage? Yeah, so we will condition this that we will have 0 light spillage. It was an error in the model with not modeling the buffer screen.
you're proposing, or you intend to propose no spillage, not, I think 0.1 is, sorry, 0.1 is proposed, 0.06 is required.
And we're going to have 0.
Yeah, and then just to clarify that to the residential, well, I would say to all of our neighboring lots, we do have spillage at Monmouth Road, but that's for safety.
Yeah, I'm talking about this.
Yep, just want to make sure that was clear.
And then going on to stormwater, we have a few comments here on some of the profile pits,
Yep.
the land cover. The existing runoff should be based on within the past 5 years. You said you can clarify all that. And one question I did want you to give a little more detail. The emergency overflow, specifically for both of them. So for the lot, for the basin out front, should that malfunction, or should we get an extreme storm, where is that going on?
So, and this is something we can work with your office post-approval, but the intention is, these are your emergency grates where they'll actually collect and then head into the storage bed. But in the event that there's a failure of the entire system, it would head in the northwesterly direction. It's the only place it can go. And the same, so that would spill over into this system. If this system were to fail, this inlet here is actually flush with the curb, and that's where our overflow would be to the northwest, where everything goes today.
Okay. Once it goes to the northwest, is that an isolated low spot on the next property?
Yeah, there's a stand of vegetation behind this parking lot that is a kind of a regional low spot.
Okay. Is that typically wet, or is that?
Not by our inspection. We went out there, working with Ben prior to the last hearing, we went out there and looked at it with topography and also visually. It doesn't appear to be wet or consistently wet. I think the soil here, and we'll do more profile pits as required, but our initial investigation showed that this area is very sandy, so we have actually a very high permeability rate. I think that's reflected to the northwest too, where that area doesn't have a lot of standing water in the event of a rainstorm for a long period of time.
Okay. Now, in the 100, you modeled the 100-year storm, did you model the 500-year?
We did not.
Okay. In the 100-year, how much discharge?
So, yeah, I'll get right into the, one second.
That never makes a difference.
So the, and the,
I like this stuff.
and the pre-development numbers, Drew, that I'm going to reference are subject to change based on the one comment that you just raised about the runoff coefficients for the existing. But pre-development, we have 1.87 CFS. For the 100-year storm, post-development is 0.17. So it's a reduction of 90%. And then the other storms, you go from, they're almost 100%. We have, for the 2-year storm, it's 0 CFS, 10 years, 0.01, and then the 25 years, 0.03. That is, as we know, like a very small amount of water discharging from the site.
So just so the record's abundantly clear, in the worst storm that we modeled for, the 100-year storm under the DEP regs, we're reducing existing runoff by 100%. I'm sorry, by 90%.
90%.
Okay. Pretty good.
That's all I have.
Okay.
Thank you. I actually, one comment on the EV. It's not shown on the plans, right?
Correct.
Okay, so they're just going to comply, it's a state regulation, and they're going to comply. The reason I say that, a lot of times, I always recommend that the EV be for illustrative purposes only, because fire departments and stuff, they have to opine on where they would like it. So as long as they're giving me numbers, it's fine. And I'm sure you'll work with the borough, with the township's fire department and others.
Yeah, the fire departments have a new rule that hasn't been codified anywhere, but they now want these 15 feet minimum from any buildings. It's not a rule yet, but generally where they can get it, and that's residential and commercial, which makes it concerned about the people that have them in a garage. But
And the reason I say those comments is that I wouldn't, being held to a certain spot, I wouldn't want, the approvals tied to a spot. This is not for this, but just in the future, let the fire department have their input on it. It's an ongoing discussion I've had with other fire departments, other municipalities.
Any other questions from the public? Okay, and our experts were, no other questions? Okay.
let's call this hand Savannah.
Thank you.
Everyone was talking about each other.
I'm next.
Okay, and please state your name,
John Ray, R-E-A.
and if you can raise your right hand, do you affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth?
I do.
Okay, and you have testified before this board before?
Yes, I'm a licensed professional engineer. My specialty is traffic engineering. I've appeared on numerous occasions in the past.
Okay, we will accept.
And, excuse me, it didn't show up in Ben's letter, which is why I didn't move it in. But you submitted a traffic letter. What was the date on that? When was that in, as 18?
It's November 20th, 2023.
And, John, why don't you just give the board a summary of this, and recognizing it's a use variance, we looked at, the comparison between what a permitted use could generate here versus what we're proposing, because we want to show that the benefits of our application outweigh any detriments.
Sure. Our 11-unit apartment building will generate approximately 8 peak hour trips. And by 8 peak hour trips, I'm talking about the total amount of traffic that would enter and exit the parking lot during the one highest peak hour of traffic flow on Monmouth Road during the morning and afternoon peak hours. That would be a lower traffic impact than a lot of the permitted uses in the commercial zone, delicatessens, convenience stores, things of that nature. So from a comparative standpoint, the proposal, in my opinion, is something that can be approved by the board without having an adverse or negative impact on traffic conditions, because it will generate less traffic than a commercial use.
And also, while the county has the jurisdiction over the driveway, and we've made whatever changes they required, including the easement for potential road widening, in your opinion, is the access driveway in and out safe and efficient?
Yes, it is. The site distance at that location, Monmouth Road, in that general area is pretty much level and straight. And as long as we provide the site triangles that will be required by the county,
the access will be safe and efficient. But I just want to say, we took the study one step further. We actually did a full traffic impact analysis. We conducted morning and afternoon peak hour counts at the intersection of West Park Avenue and Monmouth Road. And from those traffic volumes, we were able to get the peak hour morning and afternoon traffic volumes that were passing the site frontage, which our traffic exiting Monmouth Road would have to contend with in order to get out onto Monmouth Road safely and efficiently. So we looked at the existing peak hour traffic counts. They were done last fall on 2 separate days, and we projected those traffic volumes to a design year of 2026 after consulting the NJDOT's background traffic growth rate data for the area. And then we conducted a level of service capacity analysis for the site driveway. And I know the board's heard traffic testimony before, but for the benefit of the public that may not have heard traffic testimony, basically traffic engineers quantify how well a driveway or an intersection will operate by something we call levels of service. They range from A, which is the highest or best attainable level of service, to F, which is the lowest. Generally speaking, anything operating at level of service E or better is a condition that's acceptable. The levels of service that I'm talking about relate to the average delay that motorists will experience exiting the site and getting out onto Monmouth Road. The good news is, for the 2026 design year, even with the background traffic growth on Monmouth Road, our driveway will operate at level of service A, which is the highest or best attainable level of service during the morning and afternoon peak hours.
And John, we recognize that, and no one's questioning that the intersection of West Park Avenue and Monmouth Road is probably at a Z at this point, at some point. But in any event,
It's probably, based on my observations, a D perhaps, but not a Z.
but we know that it's not good, and anyone who goes there, especially in the summertime, it's very difficult. But what your testimony is because of the low intensity of traffic generation from our project, we're actually going to affect it less
That's
than we
correct.
would if it were permitted
This
use.
would have less of an impact on that location than a permitted commercial use. And I am familiar with the intersection, and there are certain cycles that are worse than a D, but we don't have Z yet. We haven't gotten
All
there.
right. And lastly, with regard to the, you took a look at the truck turning, and you agree that the garbage truck can access the site safely and the moving trucks?
Yes, and I believe Mr. Ward has in his site, in his package that has been submitted to the board, there's a truck turning template that shows the refuse removal truck pulling in a forward direction, picking up the trash from the trash room, and then backing into the part of the parking aisle that's on the south side of the project. And those movements can all be made, and the truck can exit it onto Monmouth Road. The last thing I did look at was the parking, and as Mr. Ward indicated, under the RSIS, with the EV credits that we would be getting, we are required to have 20 parking spaces under RSIS. We're providing 25. And the last thing I want to tell the board is I'm very confident we will have more than enough parking, because Rutgers just came out with a study last fall that was based on actual parking counts that have been experienced all across the state, and their conclusion was that the actual parking requirements for these types of facilities are substantially less than the RSIS. For example, the RSIS requires 1.8 parking spaces for a one-bedroom. The Rutgers study found that the actual parking counts for a one-bedroom unit were closer to 1 rather than 1.8.
But we exceed RSIS.
So we
The
exceed
fact
it,
that
actually.
Rutgers thinks that everything is too high, we still exceed it.
Right, and I guess what I'm trying to say is, at the end of the day, my expectation is the peak parking demand in the parking lot will be somewhere between 15 and 17 parking spaces, realistically.
Any questions for Mr. Ray?
Yeah, just about the summer. I mean, I know you conducted your study in the fall, and I know you referenced it, but realistically, what's the impact during the peak summer months, those
All right,
3
I'm
months?
gonna answer. I've been living in Monmouth County for 37, 38 years now, and I'm well aware of what the summer conditions are. Actually, during the morning and afternoon peak commuter hours, the traffic volumes, when schools are open, are actually a little bit higher than in the summer. The weekend volumes are higher in the summer, and some of the off-peak hours are higher in the summer, but because of the lack of school traffic, particularly during the morning peak hour, Summer volumes are actually a little bit lower during peak
Right,
hours.
and Ms. Slivin, that's why I open with that. I've lived here my whole life, and it's terrible. I avoid it in the summer. I don't even go get a bagel in the mornings in the summertime because first, it's too long of a line at the bagel place, but second, because the traffic is so bad. And the reason I raise that is that we're not affecting that, meaning we're not fixing that. That's bad, it's going to stay bad. What I was trying to elicit from John, and I hope we got across, was our as-of-right development would have a worse impact than what we're proposing.
I understand that, but that's what I'm suggesting. The bagel line is terrible in the summer.
Right.
So the traffic
No question, and we're not,
right, but if you're adding 11 units and then you're allowing parking for their guests, it does impact it in the summer. And I understand you're not making a commercial use, so you're suggesting that the residential use is less impactful. But it's still, I'm just thinking maybe perhaps, I'm not saying you have to, I'm just thinking maybe less units than 11. I don't know if that's the answer. I'm just trying to
understood it. And again,
engage in discussion, that's all.
And the applicant's position is we're entitled to a certain intensity of development. If we were going to be required to bring it down under 11, because that's what works, because remember, 2 of them have to be affordable, so we're really only at 9 market rate units here. If we were required to bring it down, we would have to look at what our commercial development would be to get a yield, and that's going to have truck traffic, that's going to have, could be a doctor's office, it's going to be a lot more traffic. So we're not here to tell you we're not going to affect it. We're entitled to develop our property. There will be an impact to traffic. It's, for lack of a better legal term, it's crappy out there in the summertime in that area, and we're not saying we're making it better. But we're allowed to add traffic from a permitted use. So all we're saying is we're not going to do that. We're going to make it less than what we're allowed to do. And that's really the best that we can
We're
do.
proposing, right. And again, like I said, I'm just engaging in discussion. And I like your very technical legal term.
Yeah, thank you.
But the fact of the matter is, the summer traffic volumes, the weekend volumes, beach traffic, it's heavily pronounced during the, Saturday and Sunday on nice beach weekends. And the lack of school traffic kind of makes up for it, that's all I'm saying.
Understood.
So a question, you said that it's a level A.
Yes.
What would be, in Ocean, what would be a midway, a level D?
Well, why don't you give the time for waiting for A versus the time for waiting for
Level of
D?
service A is the average person, based on the amount of traffic it will generate during the morning and afternoon peak hours, exiting onto Monmouth Road would wait about 10 seconds, average of delay. Some people may wait 15, some people may wait 5, but the average delay would be about 10 seconds.
And that just has to do with the gap in the light. It has to do with people giving you a courtesy way in. It's just generally speaking.
Generally, it's based on the actual volumes passing the site driveway, without really taking any credit for the fact that the traffic light at West Park Avenue will periodically provide gaps in northbound traffic on Monmouth Road. That's not even included in the analysis, but that's a fact of life.
And on level D, how long would you wait?
Let's talk about Route 35 and West Park Avenue. That's worse than the D. That's in that trying to get across Route 35. That's, to give you something comparatively speaking.
What's the how many seconds is that roughly?
Service F at a signalized intersection is greater than 80 seconds of delay. And for an unsignalized intersection, it's 50 seconds. It's 2 different measurements. But, to give you, I'm just trying to think of the worst intersection in town, it's probably 35 on West Park Avenue.
But I think importantly, John, the level of service is only impacting the people leaving our site.
Correct.
It's not the level of service at the intersection, it's not the level of service on the roadway. Essentially, it's how long our residents or their guests are going to have to wait to come and go from the site. So it's not,
I don't think that's true. I think it's the community and the overall effect.
what the level of service A, what he's referencing, that number is the amount of time to leave our driveway. We're not suggesting, all I'm suggesting is that's what the A is.
Excuse me.
Yes.
Okay, got it.
I would never tell you something that isn't true, Mrs. Whitman.
Yes, I know.
And again, it's important because this is a use variance application. Probably the single most important thing that I have to do is a comparison between a permitted use and what's being proposed, and it's a positive comparison with respect to traffic generation.
And I'm just pointing out for Ms. Beal, it's only with regard to leaving our site that it's level A. And really, that's the only intersection we're required to study as part of this.
And entering the site.
Yes, the left turn movement entering the site has to deal with a gap in southbound traffic.
And that's also-
That's also being added, yes.
Another question. In Mr. Matlack's report, he mentioned the need for a loading area. Is that needed?
No,
Okay.
and as Pat has testified to, anyone who's going to move in with any kind of moving truck or so would probably either pull up in the front, could either potentially pull up in the front parking lot for a short period of time or pull up right alongside the building,
Okay.
like the garbage truck will, and we don't expect any deliveries, any Amazon is all going to be in a van that can use one of the parking spaces. Excuse me.
Okay. Any other questions from board members? Question?
Actually, I'm sorry, I have a question. Traffic going in and out of the development, the tree, or is there, I believe there's going to be a sign there. Is the vision going to be impaired at all?
I think that he had testified to that we're going to have to provide a site triangle easement to the county,
Right.
which ensures that nothing over 30 inches can be in that area that would block anybody's view.
Correct. That's correct, yeah. The county will require a site triangle in both directions. I don't want to get too technical. It's measured 15 feet back from the edge of the travelway, and it's based on the speed limit on Monmouth Road, and we won't get a county approval without the site triangle.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, any other questions from board members? Okay, questions from the public for Mr. Reed. If you can come to the microphone and state your name and your address.
Hi, my name is Gail Topper, and I live at 100 Nelson Place. And I totally disagree with so many things you said. Getting out of Brown Place onto Monmouth Road isn't 10 seconds.
Ms. Topper, just your,
It's like when my daughter was 2 years old, she wouldn't agree with anything.
Ms. Topper, just your questions at this point.
Okay.
You'll have time at the end for comments.
Oh, so I can't, because my question is, you talked about the buses and whatever, but the summer camp buses are worse than the school buses. And so you said, oh, the summer won't have an impact when there's already traffic, but you're talking about a bunch of summer buses coming for collecting kids, and that's a concern.
I understand.
Do you have a
But I
question?
disagree that it's any worse than a regular school day,
But
as far as school buses are concerned.
But even if it were,
Again,
again, our development isn't adding to that.
Yeah, it would, because the people living there would be sending kids to camp because that's what's happening in the community. And so there will be more buses, because every camp has so many buses going and coming. There will be a difference.
Well, Ms. Topper, do you have a question, though, at this
I
point?
guess I'll come on that at the end.
Okay. Any other questions from the public? Okay, questions from our experts?
Sir, I do have one quick question. Mr. Ray, in your research, did you come across any elevated rates of accidents or pedestrian accidents in this area?
I did not do an accident analysis, again, most importantly, probably because we're going to generate less traffic than a permitted use. And, the level of the scope of the traffic study is really dependent upon how much traffic you're going to generate. The Institute of Transportation Engineers and the NJDOT typically require a project to generate 100 peak-hour trips before you would get into that level of detail. We're at 8, we're at a fraction. I probably took the study a bit further than I had to, because the recommendation from the ITE is when you have less than 100 peak-hour trips, you really just have to look at, site circulation, the parking, the driveway, the access. We did a little bit more than that, but short answer is I did not look at that.
And one other follow-up question, John. As it relates to camp, even if, assuming that, again, I think there were some assumptions in this topic question that, one, all residents are going to have children, 2, all of the children are going to be of camp age, and 3, they're all going to go to camp. But even assuming in the worst-case scenario, there are 11 apartments where they go to camp, in your experience living here and knowing how these bus routes work and having represented camps and other schools, they don't send individual buses or extra buses. They have a bus route where it would be going that way anyway, and it would make a stop on site potentially, but it wouldn't necessarily be more buses for the amount of children that are being proposed here.
No, and without getting into it in too much detail, probably because I've been doing this for a long time, I've done probably half dozen traffic studies for the summer camps, and you're right, they use, for the most part, they use the large school buses, and they have a route, and they pick up kids, and sometimes the kids travel a long way to get to camp. But they don't normally send, a small van out to pick up an individual person. That would be too expensive. They use the big buses.
Right, but that's assuming that they use the big buses. Those big buses would be stopping right in front of the lots, right?
No, when we discuss this, no, like a school bus, for example.
Right.
There would be a bus stop, so it would likely be across the street in one of the neighborhoods. They wouldn't be able to stop right on Monmouth Road, as I understand.
But they do. Some of the camps, they are door to door. They pick up right in front. So if you have 11 units, and these are all families, let's say they go to 4 different camps, you have 4 big yellow buses stopping right in front on West Park Avenue. I mean, you pay a lot of money to go to camps. These camps pick up door to door. That's what you pay for.
Well, all I can say is, I don't disagree with what you said, but
You can turn right around.
the Ocean Township School Transportation Department, I'm sure, has school buses that stop on Monmouth Road to pick up kids.
Well, Ocean Township is not door to door.
But it's the same-
Trust me, those are stops, and they would never do it on this part. They
From a
would do
traffic
it at
perspective,
stop.
it's the same impact. A school bus stopping on Monmouth Road is a school bus stopping on Monmouth Road.
I mean, not West Park, excuse me, Monmouth Road,
And
excuse me.
not to diminish the concern, because I understand the concern. We have to look at this, look at it comparatively. First of all, a couple of things. First, there may be big school buses, but it may be for areas like this. There may be smaller ones that come as it relates to certain neighborhoods. So we don't know. The school buses definitely are going to have to go across the street. To the extent that there's buses stopped, that's really an enforcement issue with the police department, whether or not the buses are allowed to stop on a main highway like that. It would be no different than if this was a retail store and a large truck came that couldn't facilitate through the site, and they would be stopped on there. It's not something that's permitted, but it's something that could potentially happen. So I think in this particular case, we're lowering the intensity of what could be there and the types of trucks that would be visiting there.
Just a question. Oh, go
I'm
ahead.
sorry. I disagree. I think listen, I'm trying to balance everyone's interest, that's all. I mean, trying to balance your client's interest and his right to develop, and the community's interest and their right to less traffic. Camp in the summer, you have 8 weeks, every single day, of potentially 4 buses, I just threw that number out, stopping Monday through Friday. If you're getting deliveries for a commercial property once a week, twice a week, and sometimes in the evening, it's not every day 4 buses, 8 a.m., and every day 4 p.m., 4 buses stopping 8 weeks in the summer.
Respectfully, I think that some of what you're suggesting is incredibly speculative as to the number of buses.
Absolutely,
the
I
number
just
of
said that.
deliveries. We met with your township planner. Residential is allowed here. So as a permitted use, the residential component is allowed. So the school buses would be there anyway, because it's a conditionally permitted use. However, the difference is we're not also mixing in the commercial. We're not also mixing in the location of a trash enclosure. We're also mixing in the coming and going, the night use. Potentially it could be a restaurant, it could be something that goes on to late hours. So again, we came in with a mixed use that had residential on top and had the commercial on the bottom. We changed it based on a request from your township planner, who in his opinion, who was hired to look out for the community, felt that this is a far better zoning alternative. And I mean, if you read his report, I think it's pretty clear. So, while I recognize that your concerns are valid, you have to look at it in the grand scheme of things as to all of the effects for the community. And the gentleman, I know he's not sitting here, I know it's on him, but the gentleman who, the township pays to look out for their interest has felt that this was the best alternative.
Another question, I apologize if you answer it. The level A, is that whether you turn left or right onto Monmouth Road?
It's what we call a weighted average. Of course, the left turn would have more delay than the right turn. It might be 15 seconds for a left turn and 5 seconds for a right turn.
So it could be 25 seconds for a left and 2 seconds for a right.
It's a weighted average. It's an average of the left and the right.
And
Because we have one lane coming out. If we had separate left and right turn lanes, you could do a calculation separately for each turning lane, but because we have one lane, it's a weighted average.
okay. And I'm not sure actually who to pose the question to, but would it be better to have a right turn only? I'm not sure who could answer
That
that.
would be the county who would decide that. And they did not feel that that was necessary, is that correct?
I don't know if we made a county.
Yeah, we have a county.
We have
County approved,
Okay.
They would be the ones that would regulate the ingress and egress.
And the big problem with restricting a left turn movement is where do people make U-turns? Sometimes the alternative is far worse.
Okay.
I'm
That's
just saying.
just answer the
Yeah.
question.
I'm just,
Okay.
explaining.
Just curious, just throwing it out there. Okay. Yes, please go to the microphone, state your name and address.
Hi, everyone. Joseph Stroud, address 101 Marcy Place. I don't know if we were really posed this question to, but, so on the talk school buses, obviously school is also the concern, and it was said before that, backing up, the beeping, the trucks, we were trying to avoid that, but we know buses have the same issue. Well, my question is, how can you guarantee that the bus won't stop on Brown Place or outside of that zone to kind of load buses for the kids? Because that Brown Place is really, the entry there is my concern.
We can't speak to what public streets are used. I mean, it's a public street, just like if your children went to camp, the bus could come to Marcy, the bus could come to Brown and pick up your kids. I can't control what happens on the public street. If the township council could certainly consider something, but it's a public street, the bus would have the right to be there like any bus or Amazon or delivery.
So again, you can't guarantee what type of residents you're going to have, whether they have children or not, but...
No, that would be against the law. We're not allowed to discriminate against
No,
families.
that's totally fine. Are you, I guess my question is, sorry, I'm trying to gather my thoughts here. As far as the residential versus the commercial, so now, again, guaranteeing that there's going to be a little bit, have you weighed out your measurements based on the addition of buses or any variables that come with commercial versus residential?
Yes.
Yeah.
Commercial is, I went through the list of commercial uses, and the truck deliveries could be just as substantial, if not more substantial, than any school bus traffic. And,
We know you don't agree.
yeah, we know, yeah,
It's not that I don't agree, I was just trying to
Given the
lay it all
rating
out.
and timing, could you give the difference, could you give the difference on how long somebody would wait, or how long the traffic would be?
Can I break something down, if it's okay with you from a layman's standpoint, because I think he's confusing you with some things.
Go ahead.
So, again, doesn't matter what our use is. Our use could be the busiest place on the planet. The wait time has nothing to do with what our use is or how much traffic we're generating, as much as it has to do with what's happening on the roadway when there's going to be gaps. So, if we're an office, for example, which I think is permitted in the zone, an office use. If we're an office use, a medical office use, and there's 10 employees, and closing time happens, and it's 5:30, and they all leave at once. well, then their wait time is going to potentially be longer sitting in our driveway. But again, that has no impact on the traffic, it's just a matter of how many cars are going out there. So the wait time only affects our residents. It doesn't affect the roadway. What affects the roadway is the number of cars that we're going to be adding to it during what they call the peak hour. So that's the distinction. So the wait time doesn't affect you as a passerby. The wait time only affects someone leaving our site. And just to go one step further, because you said his comparison was commercial, because commercial is the most intense from a traffic standpoint, right, John?
Yes.
But the ordinance permits mixed use, which allows both apartments and commercial, which we didn't do. And so in that scenario, you have the commercial traffic and the bus traffic, but we just went to the most intense.
Right.
And I hope that in lay people's terms explains it.
It explains it,
Doesn't mean that you're happy about it, but it explains. No, and John, the way I described it was accurate.
You've heard a lot of traffic engineering testimony over the years, yes. Not just from me.
Good evening. My name is Chris Binford, and I live at 20 Brown Place. So my question goes back to the survey. What Mrs. Litton mentioned was you did the study in November at the deadest time of the year. Why was there not a study done?
I would disagree with that, based on the NJDOT's seasonal adjustments.
Yeah, you don't disagree with it, so you're not explaining it correctly.
No, November's certainly not the best.
No, but...
And neither is...
John, did you apply a seasonal adjustment for summer?
I did not have to.
And if you did, would your conclusions change with regard to recognizing how busy it can be in the summer?
No, my conclusions would not change. The counts were done in October and September, when schools were open, and they are certainly not dead times of the year, not by a long shot.
So as you've lived in the town many years. I've been on that street for 30 years this year. And the busiest time of the year is mid-May to the end of September. But more so, the main part of the traffic issue is Memorial Day to Labor Day. Why was not the studies done at that time? Because
there's no need to. First of all, let me back up to the single most important thing in the use variance application, which is our proposal will generate less traffic than a permitted commercial use. That is fundamental to understanding what I needed to do in this case. I took it a step further and did the traffic analysis. It really wasn't called for something as small as this. For something that's going to generate 8 peak hour trips, I went above and beyond what I normally would have to do.
You might have gone above and beyond, but let me ask you, if I may, ask him a question to clarify. What you're saying is that even if the traffic here was at a standstill in the summertime, we're entitled, as a matter of right, to develop this property. And because of that, it would generate a certain amount of traffic. And what you're saying is that what we're proposing, whether it's terrible or it's not terrible, the dead of winter or the summer, what we're proposing is going to be less of an impact than what could go there under a permitted use.
Absolutely. If I hadn't made that perfectly clear, I hope I didn't.
And you weren't required, and I think what you're saying is you weren't required to study the roadway because, again, based on the nominal amount that we're adding, even in the worst conditions, it couldn't have any kind of appreciable impact on that roadway.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Now, my other question is your study about A, B, C, D, E, whatever it is A, right? So you now have 20 cars going in and out. We cannot even, your time frame you're saying is what, less than 3 minutes, 3 seconds, whatever it was. We have to wait. The traffic backs up just to get onto Brown Place. So now you're going to put one car coming into there, and we could potentially pulling in there, and we wait. We can wait up to 10 minutes to turn because the traffic light is backed up, and now we've got 2 sets of traffic going, trying to make turns. I get it, you have the right to develop.
No, but that's what I was going to suggest was just, I wanted to clarify something because you didn't share it. The peak hour that you talked about is from when to when? In the afternoon. I think
Well,
the
let me,
afternoon,
look, I'll do morning and afternoon, just to, let's.
because and Chris, I'm calling you Chris Benning, how do you spell your last name?
BINFORD.
And because Ms. Bimford,
The peak hour in the morning on Monmouth Road in this area, well, actually going through the intersection of West Park Avenue and Monmouth Road, is 7:30 to 8:30. That's the one highest peak hour concentrated flow in the morning.
wait. So in that hour, our site is going to add 8 cars, and it's not necessarily 8 cars at once, it's 8 cars over the course of the hour, is that correct?
And not all 8 cars will go through the intersection of West Park Avenue. Any traffic that's coming to and from the north won't even go through the intersection.
But
So
I
maybe 4 cars.
So, and I just want Ms. Bimford to understand, the 8 cars that we're talking about is over an hour, so it could be 1 car, and then it could be 10 minutes later, another car, then a minute later, another car, then 10 minutes later, 2 cars. So it's not as if you're saying 8 cars are coming in and out all at once.
Exactly. It's 8 cars during the peak hour, and again, some of that traffic will probably be coming to and from the north and wouldn't even go through the intersection. So you're probably looking at 4 or 5 cars in an hour going through the intersection as a result of this development. So you're talking about 1 car every 12 minutes.
And what was the other peak hour?
The afternoon is 4 to 5 p.m.
4 to 5.
4 to 5.
And what's the number of cars?
The morning was less than the afternoon. The morning was 989 cars going through the intersection.
No. What's the number of cars that are coming out of our site?
8 cars during both the morning and afternoon peak hour.
And is it 8 trips? Meaning
Yeah.
in and
Let me go through the ins and outs.
and again, the reason I'm asking is the 8 cars doesn't mean 8 cars coming out necessarily.
Right. Let me go through the numbers. During the morning peak hour, there would be 2 inbound trips, 6 outbound trips. Of course, people going to work, going to school, so you'd expect more people leaving than coming in. 2 inbound, 6 outbound for a total of 8. The afternoon peak hour, 5 inbound, 3 outbound, total of 8.
Okay, then we put in the mixture of buses. So by you doing that, your November traffic analysis, you missed in that 7 to 8 o'clock time frame, you've missed buses coming up and down the street, as to my neighbors had alluded to, like, there's other bus companies, and Ms. Lemon had also agreed to it, is that, you didn't agree, you
Ask the question.
asked the question, that there are multiple bus companies coming in and out, whether it's during the school year or during the summer. Now we have our public school, and then we're increasing it for the other. So wouldn't you think doing your study, your traffic study during that time frame would have changed your numbers?
We did do a traffic study during that time frame. Schools were open, and we recorded every school bus that went through.
How about during the summer?
There were more school buses going through the intersection on a school day.
John, we're not here to argue with you.
I'm not arguing with anybody. I'm trying to answer a question.
And I'm not here to argue, I'm asking a question.
I'm yelling at my witness, not you, Mrs. Bimford.
No problem.
Yeah, she's done that before.
So, if I may,
Yes.
even if you did it in the summer, and the traffic was much worse than it was when we did it in September, assuming, not saying it would be, but assuming, because there's more buses, or the peak hours change a little bit, will that change the number of cars coming in and out of our site?
Absolutely not, no.
So, again, our impact on the traffic is not changing.
Correct.
And I think that's what we're trying to come here to say. I'm born and raised here. I live one town over now. I'm here all day, every day. My office is here. I recognize it, and a lot of times you find ways around having to go to that intersection during the peak hours.
But we live on a dead-end street. So it's...
No, I have a good friend who's over on the corner of Brown and Monmouth.
Yeah. But that's what I'm saying. We are a dead-end street. We only have one way in and one way out.
Understood.
Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Weinstein?
Very briefly, I think, while we're in the public's comments are valid, I just want to go back to Mr. Lynn. To clarify, this is a commercial zone.
Yes.
Correct.
Okay. In your expert opinion, is the traffic generated by this proposal less than what a commercial use would entail?
Yes.
Because commercial uses would entail things like trucks, wouldn't they?
Certainly, a convenience store is a
Deliveries.
Yeah, a delicatessen is a permitted use, yes.
So you have to weigh that out. Now, this is for the board, but if I help the public, that's fine, that's what we're here
Yeah.
for. The main thing for you on this particular case is to understand what the ordinance has already contemplated. You may not like the proposal or whatever, but if the testimony of this expert, and you find it credible, that he's testifying that the traffic generated will be less than what a permitted use is in this zone. And that really is, that simplifies it. I mean, sometimes you may not like the impact or whatever, but for this particular aspect, that's what you have to do.
And I think what's important, and I just ask the board and the public to remember, we're not required to fix what is not a good situation, and we get that it's not a good situation out there. We just have to not be as bad as what could be permitted. And I know that's horrible for someone who lives there, and I understand that. But really, when you look at, is there a benefit to this use versus a permitted use, you have to look at what the impacts are. And traffic is one, but there's a lot of other also that I think the planner's going to get into, which would include, the late nighttime, the noise, the smell, the traffic, if it was a restaurant, things like that that the planner would get to. So, yes, this is a very big issue, but I just ask everybody to keep in their minds that it's more than just that one issue.
So that was Mr. Higgins' role, if what you said earlier, and obviously he's not here, but basically,
It's reported.
the original plan was submitted, and through consultation, I don't want to say he said no, but basically,
He said no.
okay, so he said no, and this was the best of scenarios.
We would
Okay.
be permitted to put in fully commercial with no residential, and he was not for that either. Because of the limited size of the site, because of the fact that we have to put trash enclosures by the neighbors, because you potentially now have trash trucks coming back and forth by them. There's undoubtedly going to be deliveries, with backing up on and off site, and there is no ordinance that requires that it can't be open to, midnight or, even overnight. It could be 24 hours, like the 7-Eleven. Because of all of that, he came to us. We wanted to do the commercial. That was our original application, and he basically said he can't support it, and as you know, and I've only been coming here for 25 years, and Jim's been here the entire time, if Jim is against something,
Okay.
it's very unlikely that this board is going to approve it over his objection.
And just, I'm stealing a little bit from our Coventry Square, but, when they talked about, they said, sometimes the emphasis can get misplaced. I think when the testimony of the planner comes here, that's really going to be the key. Traffic is part of it. Well, he's got to testify why this site is uniquely suited for what they're proposing. That's their proof standard. And, I'll comment further on that, but all uses in general have negative impacts. That's why we have the negative criteria. Zoning contemplates this. So again, for this narrow focus, I think that you have to weigh what he says, that it's just less than what ordinance contemplates for this particular zone. But now Mr. Ford later on will talk about why this site, what's so special about this site that a residential use is proposed rather than what is permitted. And then, he'll talk about the unique site condition, because variances should always be unique to the land, the parcel itself.
Okay. Not seeing any other questions from the public?
Mr. Ray, I have
Oh.
one more question. Sure. You're saying this is, 11 apartments, we expect 8 peak hour trips
That's based on the IPE data, yes.
for this development.
Correct.
Something similar in size, if it was a convenience store, a bagel place, or a full supply store, how many peak hour trips, ballpark, would you expect for something?
A convenience store could be, a 7-Eleven or something like that, could be up to 100 peak hour trips. I don't know about a food store, but a convenience store, a delicatessen, I'm looking, could certainly be 50 or 60 peak hour trips. Medical or dental office could be 25, 30 peak hour trips. These are all permitted uses. A restaurant, depending on what kind of restaurant it could be very busy, could be 50 peak hour trips.
Could be a bagel store?
Could be bagels.
I'm bringing bagels to the next meeting now.
I'll eat everything.
Okay.
Thank you.
No, I'm getting old, Mr. Khan. Anything else as I used to. I think Tonkella, she's going to tell you what her last name is because I'm not going to even try. Spell.
Malalari, M-A-L-E-L-L-A-R-I.
You said Malalori?
Malalari, M-A-L-E-L-L-A-R-I.
And that's why the B accent.
Sorry.
Okay.
All the L's in there, you're going to
I can't do it.
Okay.
And we'll have you sworn in?
And if you can raise your right hand, do you affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth?
I do.
Okay. You've testified before this board, yes?
Okay.
And Kella, unlike me, you have a much quieter voice, so I need you to hold the microphone up close to your mouth.
Anyone hear me? Are we on?
Yes.
Wonderful. Good evening, everyone. I want to start off with the front sheet, which is the front rendering of the proposed building. We have 3-story structure. Here you see the parking in the front. This is the main entrance right at the center of the building. We have a large format stone proposed with stucco on both sides and a wood fiber cement in the center. And this is that side parking area. And I also have an image looking from the back corner, kind of like a north-west corner. This is the side facade where you see some balconies, and again, that stone, large format stone wrapping around the base with the stucco around the structure.
And before you move off the color renderings, this is intended to be a high-end development, correct?
Correct.
The types of materials that are proposed are the materials that we would be committing to if the board approved this.
Correct.
While we're on this and before we go over, along the roof line, we see a slight protrusion that extends out how far?
It's about 6 inches.
Okay, so we essentially have a 6-inch eave, for lack of a better word,
Correct.
all around the building, and that is purely for architectural reasons.
That's correct.
And the reason I say this is because, as this board knows, anything under a roof counts as building coverage. So that 6-inch surround that's purely for aesthetics kicks us just over the building coverage permitted. Without that, if we had a square, less attractive building without this architectural feature, we would be fully compliant on building coverage. So as you're going to hear from the testimony from when he comes back as the planner, we think it's a better zoning alternative to have this architectural feature, and it's technical in nature, because the building size, meaning the volume of the building, irrespective of this overhang, meets the building coverage requirement.
That's correct. Otherwise, you'd have what's called flat parapet, and you won't have like this end crown to the building. They just don't look right.
And it's decorative, purely.
Purely decorative, kind of gets the end to the top of the building.
Okay, let's talk about what's going to be in the building.
So this is just a 2D elevation while I showed you the 3D renderings of the front, the side facade. This is where that trash room door is in the recessed alcove, and then there's a tenant door. So while the trash staff is picking up the trash, the tenants have their own separate door on top of their main front door. And then you have the side and the rear elevations for the building.
Let's go back. How tall is the building?
The building is 40 feet tall, and it's actually measured to the elevator bulkhead. Otherwise, it's 38 feet tall to the top of the parapet.
Okay, and that would be permitted for height in the C1 zone, as we're going to hear from the architect, from the planner.
Correct. So I have a couple of information here. So I do have the parapet detail, that 6-inch overhang on the upper right corner for you to see it for that crown.
And this is sheet A3?
Sheet A3. But let me walk you through the floor plan. On the right side, let's go through the first floor. On the front is where you have the entrance door. You enter, and your elevator is right there on the right. There's also a tenant lobby area for waiting. As you proceed further down, This is where you have a residential hallway, so they can come out to the parking lot area, and there's that other door for the trash room. So the tenants have the opportunity to drop their trash from their own door without having to go outside, whereas the trash staff comes in just from that double door. And then there's also a separate mail package room. And we have 3 units here, 2 bedrooms and 1 3-bedroom. We also have the basement area, which is the multi-purpose room. There's a storage area and a gym. All these are amenities for the tenants. On the upper portion of the drawing, we also show the complying signs. There's a building sign with the address, and then the freestanding sign, which is at the corner of the lot that Pat already provided.
Right, and I think importantly, if, again, the size of the building itself, we're not seeking any variance relief as compared to if it was a mixed use, the only difference being that we're taking the retail out.
Correct.
I just do a question. In Jim's original report, he says what's permitted here is 2.5 stories, 35 feet.
Right, as it relates to the, permitted principal uses there, but the conditional use does allow 40 feet, 3 stories in the zone.
This is not a conditional use.
Correct.
This is a straight use variance.
Right, but what we're talking about is what would be permitted in the zone if we were to just put the retail back.
In other words, function is singularity.
Yeah, I mean, if we put the retail back, we'd be allowed 40 feet, 3 stories. And again, our building size doesn't require any setback relief, doesn't require any coverage relief, except for that architectural feature on it. So while it may be bigger than what else also in that area, it's what the governing body decided is appropriate here. Correct.
I'm going to proceed to the next floor plans, which are identical, your second and third floor. You have 2 3-families and 2 2-families on either side. We have the roof plan. This is where the elevator bulkhead comes up, and all the mechanical equipment with roof access for maintenance.
But we don't have any roof access for a roof deck or any kind of,
This is only a roof hatch for maintenance to get up and service the condensers in the roof, basically. And then we're just showing a blow-up for each unit type to show the sizes and the layout for each apartment, basically. And that concludes the architecture testimony. Unless you have any questions.
Questions from board members?
What's the floor to ceiling height?
It varies. The basement is at 10, the first floor is at 12, and the upper 2 levels are at 9. Which is actually pretty solid. Yeah.
Any other, yes?
Maybe I missed this, but are these rentals or are these sold?
no, they're going to be rentals. I mean, they're going to have to stay, under the affordable housing, it has to be one or the other. So if we commit to, again, this board doesn't regulate the difference between rentals or condos, but we have to make a decision because it's going to depend on how it's deed restricted for affordable housing.
Will it be staffed there at all? Like, I don't know, an office person?
It would be up to the property manager. It's going to be up to the owner as to who's going to be there.
But there's a facility right now for a unit for any type of...
No.
For manager or anything like that. No, it's straight 11 units, 2 of which are going to be governed by affordable code requirements in some manner.
Right.
So we're talking about 9 units that are going to be
Right,
rented in market, and the other 2 compliant with the code.
Right, and again, that's, as you're going to hear from the planner, that is one of the benefits of the application, is that you're getting the benefit of the affordable housing, which we all recognize is something that's being promoted throughout New Jersey. So if this were purely commercial, you would not be getting the benefit of that affordable housing.
The west side of the building on the second page. This is probably a silly question. It's not actually blue. It matches the white. That's just the rendering.
There's dots on his rendering, so you get like the shadow of the
That's,
sun.
I wanted to make sure. It's going to match the rest of the building. Okay.
Can I just say, Jen, you keep saying, Ms. Krimko,
You can call me Jen, everybody else here does.
you keep keep saying commercial, but you were denied the application to be commercial.
We weren't denied, we never came before you.
Right, because...
What we said was, is that if we were the mixed-use commercial, Jim would be against it.
Right.
But if we came in as full commercial with nothing, we would go to the planning board, and the planning board would have no ability to deny it because it would conform to the use and everything else. So what we're saying is, and again, I'm giving...
Oh, but his intent, he wanted the both use, which is why you came here. Understood.
The preview that I'm trying to give to the board is that even if there are things about this application that you prefer otherwise, as you're going to hear through the testimony, it's our opinion and your planner's opinion that this really is the best zoning alternative, because the application before you is for this size with this number of units. So, again, it's not a negotiation of, well, could you go down, could you make the building smaller? We believe we're going to make our case for this, and it'll ultimately be up to the board. If the board denies it, then we still have the option, obviously, of coming in for something conforming to the planning board or something else that may ultimately not be as good of an alternative as your planner seems to think this is.
Okay.
Yeah.
Would you maybe clarify why the planner, why Mr. Higgins was concerned about this particular site and having a commercial aspect to it?
Yeah, it was because of the residences behind us. I mean, he was really seeking to...
Yeah, no, I just, for the record.
Yeah, no, he was seeking to protect the residential behind us. Obviously, if it was commercial all around us, his concerns wouldn't be so significant.
And I ask that for the public too, so they understand that this has been, an ongoing process, and that was the thinking of the planner. He was thinking about those houses.
I just want to make sure I understood something you said. If this was a mixed-use building, it would have to come in front of this board?
Not necessarily.
Only if they were looking for a variance?
Only if we were looking for, okay, so, and I think we never came and presented it because rather than fight Jim, and I'm not saying we wouldn't have won ultimately either here or court, I'm just saying we took a path of less resistance than fighting Jim, it's a conditional use. If we met all of the conditions, we go to the planning board. If we don't meet all of the conditions, we come here. So we were coming here because there were some conditions relative to landscaping that we couldn't meet.
And that's the same thing with a commercial building, too?
No, commercial building would not come here unless we needed a use variance. Under any...
Some type of variance, that's what I'm saying.
No, not some type of variance. The only type of variance that comes here is a D variance. So if we were permitted use and we needed setbacks or coverages or anything else, it's all planning board. The only reason we would come here is a floor area ratio, a height, a density, and a non-permitted use. Or a conditional use.
And if they met all the conditions.
You could just go for a permit.
No, we still have to get a site plan approval.
Site plan approval, but...
That's the planning board.
Yes.
If they meet all the conditions. If they don't meet all the conditions of the mixed use that they want to put here, setback, I don't know, something, then they gotta come here.
And your testimony was at 40 feet from the mixed use was permitted.
Yeah, it would be
So
permitted.
that D3 conditional use would not be true.
Okay, understood.
Any other questions from board members? Questions from the public? Please go.
I don't know if the architect finished, we kept interrupting her.
Yeah, she did, she said that, that was it.
She flipped her last page. I did see a blank page when she went to the next one. If you can state your name and your address.
At this point, these should only be questions to the architect.
It's a question to the architect.
Yeah, because...
I think she learned her lesson already.
I did, I'm sorry, I didn't understand the last time I came.
It was a free-for-all?
No, it was only, people were only invited up at the end, so I thought if there was any concerns about that testimony. My name is Gail Topper, I'm at 100 Marcy Place, and I just have a question about the balconies and privacy in all of our houses that are right behind that. That concerns me is that somebody's on the third floor and they're looking into our backyards and they're hanging out on the balcony and...
So we did provide a balcony for all of the units, so the 2 units in the back, there's still the kids' playground in the back before they could look out to your backyard, but we strongly feel that they should have an opportunity to have a bit of fresh air and go outside in the balcony, which is why these units were designed this way.
What is the size of the balcony?
They are small. On the smaller size, but...
And that's not a great size, you understand? It's not going to be
3
a
by
party
6.
access.
3 by 6.
It's 3 feet by 6 feet.
Okay,
Only
and
6 feet long.
And I guess, so they're not big enough that people are gonna hang out and have.
Or maybe I'll put a table over there.
What?
You can put a table on.
Okay, thank you.
How many are in the back?
So two on each floor facing in the back, you have a balcony.
So there's 2 units.
No, on each floor.
Maybe so it'd be 6.
So there's
But
two,
this-
if you follow the color, the orange is one unit, the gray one here is.
I know, but that's only one story, so over the 3 stories, there's 2 on each one.
Right, it repeats itself.
And you're putting some trees there as well.
Yes, correct. We're gonna have those trees there, but also, and when Pat comes up, we can offer the distance between the back of that building and the property line is pretty significant.
Any other questions from the public? Okay. Thank you.
Okay, we'd like to ask Pat, now that the stage has been set, Pat, and you hear what all the issues are, you on
There's a lot of what he's going to say.
yeah.
He doesn't have to be sworn in as the planner, does he?
No, he was
Okay.
sworn in.
To testify tonight. Okay.
He's got to tell the truth.
Thank you, Mr. Steinberg.
Okay, so we are here before the zoning board of adjustment because of the D1 use variance, which you heard before throughout the testimony tonight. So, give you a little background, I'll repeat myself on a few points just to get the record in, but the C1 zone which we're in conditionally permits mixed-use inclusionary development, which means commercial on the first floor, and residential units on the upper floors, or in the rear of the first floor. We're proposing a fully multi-family residential building with no commercial component. So per our discussions with Mr. Higgins leading up to this meeting, we removed the commercial component. And that was in order to reduce any perceived impact from a commercial use adjacent to our residential neighbors to the west. Well, this is a D1 variance, and we need to prove site suitability. We don't see an issue with this at all. What we're proposing is essentially the same as a conforming mixed-use building, which is simply reduce the intensity of the use.
And because of the size of the building, the size of the lot and its proximity to the residential behind, in your opinion, that's what makes this particularly suited as opposed to commercial because of the impacts.
That's exactly right. Okay. So we remove the commercial component, so the site will function even better. We talked about that already in my testimony and some of the other testimony. We feel that this site, as laid out, functions better as strictly multifamily rather than having a commercial component. I think the commercial component not only adds traffic, but also can interrupt the function of the site and also the impacts to neighbors, which we'll get to in a moment. The only difference here is what's in the building, and that's a fully residential.
And then again, our original application, if it's mixed use, if it was an office building, it actually looked the same. The only difference is we took away the retail signage.
That footprint and the size, the massing of the building is exactly the same, maybe some color changes, but in addition, talk about the location, and we like the location of the project for multifamily because we're proposing 11 units right next to the existing corridor of Monmouth Road where it meets West Park.
Patrick, when you say we like, you're not speaking on behalf of the applicant likes it. You're speaking on behalf of, from a professional planning perspective, why the site is particularly suited
Correct.
for residential, because it will feed into the commercial corridor, and it could be a pedestrian availability where you have houses that could walk to the, I said it a million times, to the bagel store or any of those other commercial uses there, as opposed to having to drive.
Right, so this is planning strategy 101, populate the walkable commercial neighborhoods, and populate that with multifamily residential units. It helps the business district thrive and succeed, and this is specifically mentioned in the township master plan, which we'll get to in a moment. We have some bulk or C variances.
And before we go into them, just to point out, technically, and Ron, technically Ron can confront us as Tim Mark. When you need a D1 use variance, there's a case, a Supreme Court case called Price versus Hameji, where it basically says that the use itself is not permitted as a principally permitted use. The underlying zoning can't really apply because it wasn't intended for it. So it's really subsumed into the use variance. So while we're giving testimony as to how this would comply if this were a fully permitted use or a conditionally permitted use, it's really as it goes to the negative impact, as opposed to us technically needing these bulk variances. Would you agree?
I would agree.
I think it's my favorite case because it's on a lot of different things. And the wording they use actually is subsuming, that was the Vallejo case. That was the
Okay, I stand corrected.
That's Price to the Supreme Court, I think they were a little stubborn on this. They don't want to use the word subsuming, so they use ancillary. A board can consider it ancillary to the use variance itself.
But again, the testimony that we're giving is to compare it to what is permitted here and how we differ, whether it be a permitted use or a conditionally permitted use.
And I'm sure planner will testify to the specific C variances irregardless of the ancillary nature.
Correct.
Because he's going to make his record.
Correct, which is,
I would do that.
yeah. And that's what I was about to do, why I interrupted him, because I just want to point out to you that we're going to give you all of this testimony, but under that Supreme Court case, it technically is not subsumed but ancillary.
And the reason I say that's favored is there's another clause in the price that talks about, they said that the zoning board should not determine a property is particularly suited because it's the most suitable site in the municipality. It should be appropriate, especially beneficial, based upon the unique conditions of the site that is here. As I said, they touch all of this.
Right, and I was just going to jump into the bulk variances, or the C variances associated with it. So I'll go through, I'll identify each one and describe a little more as to, what we're proposing and why. So we have a max lot coverage where it's supposed to be 27% of the buildable lot area. And the max lot coverage for this particular commercial district is the building only, right? So the number is 27% of the buildable lot area. We're slightly over that at 27.8%. This equates to about 133 square feet of additional building coverage, which I feel is de minimis. It's important to note that the building itself, the footprint of the building at the ground floor, is 27% of the coverage. Its eaves that were referenced before create the additional 0.8%. We, the team and myself, I feel it's a better planning alternative to include these architectural elements for aesthetic reasons.
If the board, if you want to see Jim's report, it's all here.
Yes.
They can get a better picture.
Yeah, they're enumerated in Jim's report with some commentary as
And
well.
certainly, the eaves don't affect light area or open space.
They do not. So lot coverage controls are put in place for two reasons: aesthetics and runoff. Regarding runoff, as we described earlier in the engineering testimony, our stormwater management system significantly reduces the runoff rates from the subject property, which is a benefit. Regarding aesthetics, thoughtful and comprehensive landscape design, along with the beautiful architectural design of the building, will create an exceptional aesthetic, an amazing streetscape, which will also be a benefit. Maximum building in this zone, 2.5 stories and 35 feet is permitted. I know we touched upon this before. We're proposing 3 stories, and to the roof is 34.5 feet. So we're conforming for height in feet, and we're requesting a variance for the full 30 stories.
Clarification, is it because we've had, it's written here, there's 3 stories, or 3 stories and 40 feet proposed. Is that a typo in this, or has that been changed?
It's 40 feet, not 34.
I think the testimony was that the building is 38 feet.
40 feet to the elevator over.
Another 2 feet. I'm not sure, can we count the elevator?
Well, you know what?
Okay, time out.
I will confirm.
What I can tell, now, there's a couple things. The 34.5 is to the rooftop. There is then a parapet on top of that, which is what takes you up to the 38 feet, right?
So we have 34'6" to the top of the roof structure.
Just talking to the microphone.
Okay. So from average grade, we have 34'6" to the top of the roof, which is really a line right at the bottom here. Then we have the high parapet here, which is another 3'6". Then we have an additional 2 feet at the elevator bulkhead above that top of the
So
parapet.
the entirety of the building is not at that 40 feet, it's just that one elevator
30
bulkhead.
to the building and then the elevator
And
bulkhead.
when you say it's from average grade, where is our finished floor in relation to average grade?
Is that everything?
Okay. And I pointed out that this board is familiar with measuring height from finished floor, and this one is accessible at the same level.
So the report is accurate. It
Yes.
says 2.5 and 35 and 3 feet and 40, okay.
Right, 40 being at the max to the elevator, but the majority of it is lower than that.
Right, so we're seeking the variance for the third story, not the actual physical building height in feet.
Well, no, we are
I
seeking.
think you need both.
The,
I
believe
believe
you-
the reasons, but I think for clarity's sake, we'll grant it.
Okay, I have the answer. It's under 21-52.1. Looking for on the negotiation. It talks about height. And here it is. Mechanical appurtenances such as air conditioning and heating units and elevators shall not exceed the height limit of more than 6 feet and shall be screened in a manner. So they can go 6 feet above 41.
So we can actually go to 41, so the elevator is compliant, and the parapet, is the parapet accepted out as well?
Church fires, clock towers, Oh, yes, the provisions of this chapter shall not apply to prevent the erection above the building height limit of a parapet, wall, or cornice for ornamental purposes with screened mechanical appurtenances.
The building is at 34.
So the building is at 34 and a half feet, so we actually are compliant in height. Half.
34.5.
Yeah, 34.5, so we're under the allowable height.
Plus the parapet, plus the shaft, which do
They're-
not
They don't count, so we're under the, so I stand corrected, Patrick was 100% correct, and I was wrong. We meet the height requirement, which is the advancing of the building, it's just a matter of how many floors we have under that height.
Right, yeah, that's absolutely right.
Except we were supposed to go forward in February, so I apologize. It's been,
We got the answer.
yes, thank you.
Right, and I don't think, the next question, the number of stories becomes a deterrent.
Can't, it has to be 10%, you can't be 10%.
The number of stories. I think that's just a bulk.
There was actually discussion in Cox on that. They said, there are turning, if you don't regulate by feet, then in theory, if you only regulate it by stories, if you go above 10%, you would need at least 600 variance. But since you regulate both, the default is feet. So that's what would trigger the stories would be a street.
But again, we technically need the variance because that's what's allowed for permitted uses. We're not a permitted use, and there are conditionally permitted uses that are allowed to be 40 feet and 3 stories, which we need. So again, it's just that, I apologize, we're at 34 and a half feet in height. That's better than the ordinance.
Okay, so I'm going to move on to the side yard setback.
I guess it's different, also that you can put 3 stories within the height requirement.
That's the point, yes, that we meet the physical height requirement, but we'll provide the 3 stories.
Can I ask a question on that?
Sure.
So the 3 stories would be permitted if there's retail on the bottom,
Correct.
but you need the variance if there's going to be no retail. So if there's only a 2-story building,
So again, if there was retail on the bottom, we would be 3 stories, but again, we're not, that doesn't apply, and neither does the permitted uses, because there is no regulation for this use because it's a D variance. So just by way of comparison, we comply with the height under the conditional use standards and the bulk standards. We comply with the number of stories under conditional use. So again, it's an ancillary relief as to the underlying zoning, but the underlying zoning wasn't designed for this use.
And Mr. Higgins' letter goes into this, and he tried to find a comparable zone, because you can do that, see. But he said, really, for this particular use, there is no comparable zoning, so he stuck with C1, the underlying C1.
But again, Mr. Lineski, it's just for the number of stories, it's not for the height.
Okay. The next bulk variance is side yard setback to the parking lot. We're proposing 7.53 feet on the north side, 5.4 feet on the south side, where 10 feet is required. So our landscape plan focuses on these areas, as you can see, and buffers them what I would consider heavily. The south side property line is a small area of encroachment for the little turnaround there at the end of that parking bay. And the north side property line is nearly compliant at 7.53 feet. The landscape design will make these parking areas and their encroachments imperceptible. The parking stall size, we're proposing 9 by 18 parking spaces, where the ordinance requires 10 by 18. But this application is 100% residential development, which means the RSI standards govern at 9 by 18 parking. So the plan is compliant for parking lot stall size with RSIs. The parking setback to the right-of-way, we're proposing 15 feet where 25 feet is required for one bank of parking. Our other bank of parking complies at 25 feet. So what that means, when I say banks of parking, we have the little parking area in front, and then we have the area on the north side. The area on the north side meets the 25-foot setback. But the 5 spaces facing Monmouth Road in the front, that's where our relief is sought. I think it's important here to look at, I believe it's A6. And what you can see here is that our parking area is consistent with or better than some of the other developments on Monmouth Road. Some of these developments have parking right on the right-of-way, as you can see. We feel we're better than or consistent with much of the development on Monmouth
And
Road.
importantly, in the board planner's letter, he indicates that he has no concerns with the parking in location.
Right. And our landscape plan, as you can see, focuses on this area. We provide a substantial buffer to Monmouth Road for headlight screening and for the attractive streetscape. There's also another benefit to this. By moving the parking forward to the front property line of the subject property, we're able to move it away from the residential neighbors to our west. So we actually are focusing, we're trying to focus the parking towards the front, which again is more of the impactful use of the property, towards the front, towards Monmouth Road, to keep it away from the neighbors at the rear. Just for further reference, an earlier iteration of this plan showed the building right up on Monmouth Road and all the parking in the back. So we're taking all that parking and concentrating it.
Which would have been conforming. I think the front yard setback in the zone is 5 feet.
Correct.
So we could have put the building on the front, but it's only the parking. The rear of the building is just 15.
Correct. Another bulk variance is location of the curb cut. So the ordinance requires curb cuts to be located in the middle third of the subject property's frontage. I'm going to pull up A7. Easier to see. But this property means that the curb cut must be at least 41 feet in from each side property line. So what we have here is a property that's only 120 feet wide. We're proposing a curb cut 5.12 feet from the side property line. This was also a waiver that we obtained from Monmouth County Planning Board already. We designed the driveway with a standard width of 24 feet and provided minimum curb radius to accommodate the garbage truck. So as a result, our curb cut is 65 feet wide. The entire property frontage is 123.25 feet wide, which means we could never comply with the location of the curb cuts ordinance requirement on this type of lot. Even if the use were permitted, the building and site design would virtually be the same, and we would still require this variance. So this application, in my opinion, furthers the following purposes of planning. Purpose A, this is an appropriate use and development which promote the general welfare. This use and development fits very nicely into this neighborhood, and the site suits it very well. One of the great benefits of this application is providing more population in an established, walkable retail neighborhood. It helps support the local businesses on Monmouth Road. This application also provides more housing options in a very, very desirable town.
And when you say more housing options, additionally, it provides the affordable housing, which, as we know, has been recognized as a benefit by our courts.
That's correct.
And our statute.
Right. All this together promotes the general welfare. Purpose B, this application secures safety from flood, panic, and other natural man-made disasters. The stormwater management system, as we testified to, captures and manages stormwater runoff, which helps secure safety from flood. Purpose C, this application provides adequate light, air, and open space. This very same building and site design could accommodate a permitted mixed-use development, and the setbacks and the height would be compliant. So the bulk of our plan meets the intent of your ordinance, which provides adequate light, air, and open space, as I mentioned before. Purpose E, this application promotes the establishment of appropriate population densities and concentrations that will contribute to the well-being of persons, neighborhoods, communities, and regions, and preservation of the environment. This purpose is advanced by providing housing in an existing walkable retail neighborhood. Purpose G, application provides sufficient space in appropriate locations for residential uses. Again, this is an ideal location for a multifamily residential building. It's a mixed-use neighborhood, including residential uses, with lots of walkable retail. Purpose I, this application promotes a desirable visual environment. The architect and landscape architect prepared exceptional designs that will enhance the aesthetics of the neighborhood. Purpose J, this application prevents urban sprawl and degradation of the environment through improper use of land. We're providing 11 residential units as infill development. This, by nature, helps prevent urban sprawl. We feel this application conserves property values in the neighborhood. Based on the designs, I believe this is going to be the most attractive neighborhood along this stretch, attractive property along this stretch of Monmouth Road. This is going to benefit the entire neighborhood and conserve, if not increase, property values. As for the negative criteria, in short, I don't see any negative impacts from this project.
And let me just correct you. It's not that you don't see negative impacts, you don't see any negative impacts that wouldn't otherwise be realized by a permitted use.
That's correct.
Okay, because
As
was offered and testified to by the board planner, every development has a negative impact. The question is, does it rise to the level of substantial, does it outweigh all the benefits?
Can I stress one word?
Yeah.
Substantial.
Yeah.
Because when you go into it, it's substantial.
Right.
Substantially impaired is zone plan, substantial detriment.
It's like you read ahead in the outline. We get there.
Yeah, I get that. I just want to make sure that,
No,
that's how I always say, that's the threshold, that's the key word, substantial.
But that's why I interrupt them, because we can't say there's no negative impacts, because any development has a negative impact. It has to be a negative impact not already contemplated by the ordinance, and so substantial that it outweighs the benefits.
Correct. So if we propose a mixed-use development, the building and the site could remain exactly as designed today. We would just be swapping out space on the first floor for a commercial use. The commercial nature of this neighborhood is already established and could benefit from more residents as customers. Eliminating the commercial component of the proposed development reduces the potential for adverse impacts to our residential neighbors to the west.
And to Monmouth Road and the traffic in the area.
And to Monmouth Road, and that goes into my next point. The intensity of the use is reduced. Daily activity is reduced. There's less traffic, there's less loading, it's not required anymore, and deliveries. It avoids potential for odor from food service.
And an exterior trash enclosure.
And an exterior, yep, and that goes hand in hand with that food service as well. That can be very impactful. We're consistent with the intent of your ordinance to provide residential units. It's merely the ground level commercial that's omitted here. We're consistent with your ordinance for building height. If we had a commercial component, we would actually conform with that third floor.
Well, actually, it would be much less.
We have less height.
We'd be 6.5, 5.5 feet under what would be permitted.
Correct. The parking design is pulled forward and away from our residential neighbors to the west, which we feel is a benefit, which I feel is a benefit. The curb cut provides better circulation within the site and doesn't impact any neighbors. Our neighbor to the north is a medical office, as Ms. Krimko pointed out earlier. The driveway is on Brown Place, not Monmouth Road. So there's no conflict with that neighbor and use his driveway with our driveway. In my opinion, site circulation works very well. The landscape design is substantial and provides great visual buffer around the entire perimeter of the subject property. The purposes outlined in the Township's 2023 master plan mirror the purposes of planning from the municipal land use law, which I just went through. So in that regard, this application is consistent with the master plan. The application is also consistent with the recommendation in your master plan. On page 80 of the land use plan section, the master plan says, quote, "The intersection of West Park Avenue and Monmouth Road in Oakhurst consists of a number of stores, many of which are underparked. It is recommended that a comprehensive plan be prepared that will provide adequate parking for all uses in this area and encourage pedestrian movements between commercial sites so that the area becomes a vibrant neighborhood commercial area." We're consistent with this recommendation for a couple of reasons. First, we're fully parked. As a matter of fact, we have 5 additional extra spaces for visitors. Second, this property is connected for pedestrians to walk from this development throughout the existing commercial area in the neighborhood. So we're fully consistent with this recommendation of the master plan. The proposed development would not cause substantial detriment to the public good, nor would it substantially impair the intent and purpose of the zone plan, which is the master plan and zoning ordinance. So at this point, you bring up the word substantial, and does any of the impacts of this application rise to the level of substantial in this case? In my opinion, they do not. That's what the board has to weigh when they're looking at the impacts of the development. Just to touch upon one final thing with regard to the Medici criteria for the use variance, I believe we provided proofs to support your finding that the proposed use is substantially consistent with the master plan and zoning ordinance, and that we're able to reconcile granting the use variance in light of the use's omission from being considered permitted in the ordinance. So on balance, it's my opinion that the benefits of this application substantially outweigh its detriments, if any, giving the board the ability to approve this application with confidence. That will close my direct testimony.
The garbage, how many times a week would you pick up? It would just depend on the need. It would be private, so it would just be depending on the need. They would be able to schedule it. And it would be in off hours, obviously, it would be during peak hours, would it be traffic.
Any other questions to Mr. Ward from the board?
I have a question. Some stuff in Mr. Higgins' report that I'm curious, I didn't hear you touch on. The landscape area along the front side and rear of the property, it looks like you took care of his suggestion on the southern side where you didn't have any coverage and you're putting pavers in that location now, correct?
Yes. Mr. Mayor, one of the questions also that I asked the architect is why aren't we landscaping it? And the reason being is you can also, we have to have egress access, so we can't have landscaping there.
But we're doing the pavers.
We're doing the pavers to make it attractive, correct.
And then on the, I guess the west side of the property, it says, well, I guess it doesn't really address the west side, because you have the, I guess you have enough room on the west side because you have the playground, correct? And the,
yes, and also we will agree with the 4 inches of mulch. If we didn't put that
well, that's
already.
Yeah, I was going to
We will agree with the sprinkler subject to where Jim thinks it's appropriate.
Any other questions from board members or?
What about, you asking for a waiver for landscaping plan though?
Licensed landscape architect.
Okay,
No, we actually submitted it by a licensed landscape architect.
Yeah, so we're not receiving that waiver.
So that one's gone, and you want, the only waiver is just for sprinklers.
No, but we're providing a sprinkler system.
Right, so you don't need that waiver either, yeah. That's done, okay.
Any other questions?
Just one item here. Well, actually, it goes to the master plan. It was recently adopted. So the last time I was here, the master plan was adopted. So sometimes it's a timing issue. When we talk about what the ordinance says, what the master plan says. And in your professional opinion, has there been enough time to really count? This council is adopts ordinance. Planning board adopts the master plan, and then it's up to council to take recommendations. So in your opinion, has there been enough time between the 2023 adoption and to act on some of the recommendations in this plan? Or is, this could be, it's more like a timing issue.
Since the master plan was adopted in 2023, we're already in April 2024. I would say yes.
You just want to clarify. And one other item, when you, and I was seeing, you cited where I see on page 80. I was just going to see, did you look at the first paragraph of the commercial land uses? Because there was a big picture item here. And Mr. Higgins, I'll flip you off with this master plan, right? Okay, so he said that the master plan does not anticipate any significant changes to the boundary of the commercial areas of the township. However, it's anticipated that the types of uses permitted in commercial areas will be modified in reaction to current and anticipated future needs and demands. It is anticipated that there will be more mixed commercial residential development areas that are appropriate. In light of that statement, would you still concur this is an appropriate location?
I feel like that statement supports what we're trying to achieve here.
I'm not trying to lead the witness, but I think that was an important element of the big picture item. Because the purpose of commercial areas is to promote commercial activity, and I think the testimony is that this particular use will not be mixed use anymore, almost introduces a mixed use element into this particular area, and it'll afford walkability and support other businesses.
And I think what the applicant's saying is that residential is contemplated in this zone by the mixed uses, and we're providing that residential, we're providing the important affordable housing that the ordinance seeks to do, and as well as that settlement from the court case seeks to do, without the negative impact of introducing more commercial that's going to just makes the traffic worse than it is during the peak hours.
Any other questions? Questions?
Question, real quick. So, it's all going to be residential. Is there anything that would prohibit some time in the future of adding commercial down there?
Absolutely, we'd have to come back to this board, or go back to the board.
Well,
Could we restrict it?
No, I just said to the board.
You can make it compliant.
Right, we would not be able to make any change to this at all without going back to the board on another public hearing.
Peter Wood.
Right.
And the resolution runs with the way.
Correct, no future user can do it. If this board approves this, it would be this use with these conditions, looking the way it looks, with the landscaping and everything else, until such time as another board approves something different.
Okay, any questions from the public for the planner?
Madam Chair, before we get to the public comments, could we have a health break?
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
9:15? 7 minutes?
It's a long time. I guess we're voting on it,
Oh, I just want to stretch.
Exhausted everything. You can't change it. It is what it is.
Oh, my God.
There's a meeting.
Actually, there's already residential all around, so one of them.
Yeah, this is the best one. Oh, you're back. Oh, I love that one.
Right.
Okay.
And the size of the town, you can't do, besides the ordinance we already have, you can't do less than 30. Well, we already have that.
Yeah, no, I know.
Because you can't do every Airbnb.
Right, but we can't.
But it's up to him to do whatever he wants.
The height, if they were given something out where it's like a 12 or 15 height residential, I was going to say, we'll make the building smaller.
That's what you just said. Because I said it's too big, it's too tall, it's
But
massive.
they're only 9-foot ceilings.
So,
That's why I asked the question. But they're also compliant with height
correct.
now. Why did these people want to see that? And then within the law?
Yes.
I mean, because they keep saying, imagine, I think the residential is the least impacted on anything.
Well, yeah, when it took me a minute to realize.
Yeah.
Okay, he's saying Jim is like, look, this is the only thing I'll allow without fighting it,
So, when I say the story, like any other one.
Because what's there now? What's there now? It's road, dirt.
Yeah, just dirt. There was a building.
I think aesthetically, I think the traffic is...
Will that be massive? It's probably, I don't know. Yeah, all these houses are putting up on Monmouth. They're all massive. I don't think we can dictate that. That are going up, and they're all moving.
That was interesting. I learned something about the level A is 10 seconds, and the level... I'm like, so now they're like, so are you a level A or a level D community? I need to know before I move there.
You know what?
Are you a 10-second or a 20-second?
I love your idea.
Well, I don't know if it, because like he said, well, if I can only make a right turn, then I'm going to start U-ing it, and so I don't know what the, well, I know it's not us to, but I've always wondered, like, why some places have it versus others.
Can you imagine in the summer how long somebody's gonna wait? I am just, I'm gonna mark the accident. Make it absurd. You know how many accidents are gonna be there?
It's okay with me.
Do they have a lot of accidents now?
It's not accidents.
No, because my son going to work, he's going to the high
Every
school.
summer, do you know what's there at that red light?
They came out of the 7-Eleven.
The number of expletives that fly from the cars, like the Porsches and the Lambos and the Mercedes and BMW. That's all I hear. And my daughter sits there and I'm like, don't say a word. Just be quiet. Just be, don't go down here. I'm like, just be quiet.
You have to be ready. It's like the Indy 500. You've got to be ready to make your turn.
That's all I hear. That's all I hear. And then, when an ambulance wants to come by, I'm like, just move over, and nobody else moves over. People that sit in the middle and don't move, and especially in the summer, it's insane. And unfortunately, it's usually women with little kids in the car that sit there and don't know what to do. And it's only like 2 or 3 cars, but they sit and they don't move. And you're incredulous. You sit there and you're like, oh my God, how could you not move?
And we come back for more fun on Thursday, right? And they properly notice? No, I'm kidding.
I like how Jen protected the witness her traffic stop.
Yeah.
She's very good. She's very mother hen-like.
We'll be here Thursday. So you can have your buddy back so you can see him.
I might end up there, you never know.
Oh, no.
I told you I asked my questions.
I was right with my answer.
I guess what I was, you know how sometimes the applicant will say, if this is something the board, like we'll concede to it even though we don't have to, but I don't know when a right turn only is better or worse. I get that who does it, but how does it come about that some places you can only make a right? Like, how did they feel that
would be done by, they would make those recommendations.
To the county?
No. So, the county has no problem with it, because the county road. But if it was West Park, the police department can make the recommendation.
Right, like you know how there's no left turn.
Okay. Analysis, they can do that.
That's what,
Because we don't have jurisdiction, the county doesn't have jurisdiction over Monmouth Road.
but like what I'm saying is, how would the county even know, like, that's what I'm saying, they don't know, but they probably could care less, like, so who's the one?
That's because
Alrighty, let's get back. 9:15, I think.
You a gavel.
Okay. It is now time for public comment. Tap, tap, tap. Do we have any members of the public who would like to make a comment?
The public gave me some input, and I just wanted to offer something on the record.
Are you going to repeat each other? No? Okay.
No, it's just something in response to the public. They made a very good suggestion, and to the extent that the board grants its approval, we would ask that it be with the ability to do this, even though it's not shown on this plan. They had suggested that the people who park, the employees and the like for this commercial area in the summertime park on their street, and it may be benefit to us to put up a fence on this side and on this side. So we don't have it shown on the plan. It wasn't something we were aware of. If the board were to approve this, we would just ask for flexibility to work with
In other words, those people parking the street and cross this property.
They walk through the public, yes.
To get to work.
Yes.
So that the fence would be.
So what we would ask for
They wouldn't
is,
park on the street.
well, they might still have to park there, but now they gotta walk around. So again, we would just ask for the flexibility to add a conforming fence that isn't shown on the plan now, and if we were to approve it, it would be subject to Bill, not Bill at all. Bill hasn't been here in years. It'll be subject to
Which side we?
both sides. We want the option to put fencing on the north and south
And south side.
that would be compliant with height.
Compliant with height, style, to be approved, right?
Yeah, right.
Style and material.
Right.
Style, material.
Okay, you can state your name and your address, please.
All right, I don't know what to say, this isn't working.
If you tap it, it might be.
It got turned off. She was pushing a button on the side. You're the best.
Batteries are out.
He's a professor, he can talk loud.
Gotta get close.
What are you, you're a professor of what?
I'm a professor at the Cooper Union School of Engineering.
Why don't you just sit down and use this microphone?
Awesome. Yeah, it is.
That's a great school.
Thank you. I was also a faculty member at Monmouth University for some years. You said...
Where I graduated from?
Yeah, I'm sorry, did you give us your name and address?
My name is Robert Topper. I'm at 100 Marston Place.
And you're going to testify now?
Yes.
Okay, then.
If you can raise your right hand.
I've already said some of the things that I...
Testify as public comment.
Oh, yes.
If you can raise your right hand, do you affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth? Okay.
Yes, I was going to suggest that some thought be given to cross-property traffic, because we do have a lot of problems with lots of cars parked along Brown Place in the summertime. Employees of the businesses adjacent to this property do not allow their employees to park in the lot, so they do tend to park on Brown Place, which also makes getting in and out of there even more challenging during the summer.
Mr. Topper, may I suggest that you, when that occurs, let Colleen know, because that's a violation. They're not allowed to do that. And I know that in the past, when the hair salon used to do that, your predecessor, Mary Walensky, used to issue summonses and tickets. So it's not just a police issue, it's also a zoning issue. That is something that, I'm sorry that I'm bringing it to you, but unfortunately, that's your position.
Yeah,
So it is something
it's
that...
litter, it's a whole,
So that they can be issued...
Just write your name down.
No, but they can be issued summons because they're supposed to park on their site. And then also, the hair salon used to rent spaces from the bagels place, and they weren't allowed to do that.
That bagel place is just...
You know what, I miss the bagels. Get it?
Just very briefly, I think my main comment, and I think I said this offline as well, is that a lot of the concern comes from the fact that the property before it was an empty lot, was a single-family dwelling. And I think it was that way for many, many years. And that's the way it was when I bought my house 21 years ago. And so now, despite everything we said, which I understand, what we see is, in this place, a big three-story building going up. And we don't we think we know what the impacts will be, but we're worried that there are going to be impacts that we haven't even thought of yet. So I guess that's really all I have to say. The concern, I appreciate all the effort that's gone into making this plan and trying to do it in a way that benefits the neighborhood. I do appreciate that very much.
Is it Dr. Topper or Mr. Topper?
It could be Herr Dr. Professor Topper.
Okay.
In Germany, anything you like.
Mr. Topper. Rob. Just for the benefit of the board, because they didn't hear what you indicated, I said offline, and it's okay, I'd just like to share with them. What I explained to Mr. and Mrs. Topper is that I recognize that they liked having a single-family home there, but ironically, that's a non-conforming use of the zone. To rebuild a single-family home would need a use variance. So, while it was great, and you had the benefit of having this non-conforming use there all that time, unfortunately, or fortunately, you bought next to a commercial district, which contemplates commercial uses there. So what we talked about was, in light of all the concerns and issues that he has with the commercial uses, this is going to be less, potentially, than what they have. So that was when he referenced what we talked offline. I just want to put on the record.
Thank you. Any other comments from the public? Okay, a motion to close the public hearing.
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Okay.
May I have a moment to sum up, Madam Chair?
Yes.
I understand the concerns that I'm hearing mostly from the, I'm going to call this, what direction are we in? The east side of the board? But joking aside, I understand the concerns from some of the board members. That's your job. That's why you're here. But at the same time, we have to look at this in the big picture, not as to one potential impact. We have to look at, again, what it's zoned for. The one thing that I failed to get on the record that I think is important to note now is, under the prior approval, where it was a conditionally permitted use, we had 8 residential units, and the first floor was commercial. So what we're talking about here is not residential, not residential. We're really talking about just replacing commercial on the first floor with 3 more residential units. So it's not as if we're going from 0 residential to 11, which I think we talked about with the busing and everything else. 8 would be permitted as a matter of right under the conditional use standards. We're just talking about changing out the commercial. The complaints that we've heard from the neighbors really have to do with traffic, which, as our traffic engineer testified, would be far worse even with the buses. And even I disagree with John a little bit. In the summertime, getting behind a camp bus sucks. That's another legal term. So we recognize that that's part of living on the shore, that's living in a community where a lot of the kids go to camp. But even notwithstanding that, the number of trips, which could be upwards of 50 to 100 during these peak hours on a roadway that we already know is not functioning well at that intersection, would have a hugely detrimental impact, would be permitted, and the planning board would be compelled to grant it. So what you're given here is the option to do what this board does best, and that is weigh the positives and the negatives. The concerns from the neighbors are traffic. You heard the traffic testimony. Ben isn't here, but his report didn't disagree with any of the findings in it, that what we're proposing is going to be far less intense from a traffic perspective than a permitted use. The other concern that you heard was some of the other impacts as it relates to the commercial uses, the excess parking of employees, and the things that our planner talked about and your planner talked about, which is the trash, the noise, the late night lighting, and the overall intensity of the use. So this is not like a case where we're introducing a wholly unconsidered use in a pristine neighborhood. For example, putting a business in a single-family residential zone, or putting the apartment in a single-family residential zone. You have this area that's mixed use. We meet the intent of your ordinance by providing residential, by providing the affordable housing. We meet your master plan by providing more pedestrian traffic, so to speak, to this commercial corridor that you have, without taxing the traffic and the parking as it relates to it. And I know that at least one member of the board wishes that the building was smaller. And I understand that, but the application before you is for what it is. And the application before you is for a building that, according to your ordinance, is less in height than what the ordinance permits, which is 35 feet or 34.5 feet. The parapet is accepted out, and the elevator tower is accepted out. We don't need any setback variances with regard to this building. We don't really need any coverage variances except for an ornamental piece of trim around the outside of the building, which I think everybody agrees with enhances the aesthetics of the building. So as far as does the building fit in this neighborhood and does it fit according to zoning, it does. The only variance we really need is with regard to the number of stories, which they typically put in both to keep it from being excessively tall, and it's just two ways to protect it. In this particular case, it doesn't have any impact. We have a tremendous amount of landscaping. We have an excess of parking. We're willing to address every concern that was expressed by your planner as well as your engineer. And we really have uncontroverted engineering and planning testimony. And I go a step further. It's not only not uncontroverted, but it's strongly supported by your own experts. And many of you sitting on this board have been through a few applications with me, and we're not always so lucky to have your board engineer and your board planner so wholeheartedly support a proposal, and oftentimes it could be a battle of the experts. In this case, you not only have applicant experts telling you this is the right development for this space, but you have your own experts telling you that. And we came here as a compromise after meeting numerous times. So in light of all of that, in light of the fact that it's not just about a negative impact, it has to be so negative to rise to the level of substantial, and it has to be so substantial to outweigh all the benefits that we spent the last 3 hours talking about. We would ask that you please vote in favor, subject to the conditions that we talked about at the hearing. That's compliance with Ben's letter, compliance with Jim's letter, and our ability to put in a conforming fence along the side property lines to hopefully help some of the cross-traffic from the employees of the adjacent commercial.
Thank you.
Yeah, well, anything we didn't testify to, we will comply with as it relates to SID. Yeah, there was nothing in any of the reports. Your traffic safety officer didn't have an issue with it. Your crime prevention didn't have an issue with it. Fire prevention didn't have an issue with it. All of your outside review agencies felt that this was appropriate.
Okay. Someone offer?
I'll move for a positive resolution.
I'd like to just break it down.
Yes.
I'm sorry.
Everybody wants to go home.
Well, it's a very, gonna vote for the use, let's start with the use, that's all.
Oh, what?
Let's start with that, then the votes, and the site plan.
Okay, and I believe it was seconded?
Who seconded? I'm sorry.
Ms. Whitman.
Isn't that a surprise?
No, I just needed to flush it all out.
Whitman?
That's you.
Yes. I didn't hear you.
Ashkenazi?
Yes.
DeGenero?
Yes.
Lineski?
Yes.
Caramanica?
Yes.
Chairwoman Beal?
Yes.
Did we do the site and the bulk together?
Now, let's do the bulks that are in Jim's report. I don't have to vote.
Okay. Someone offer?
I'll offer a positive resolution.
Second.
For bulk?
Yeah, which is, yeah, no, there's no waivers.
There's no, that's it.
The waivers are on, it's just the bulk variances. And the reasons were set on the record.
Whitman?
Yes.
Ashkenazi?
Yes.
DeGenero?
Yes.
Lineski?
Yes.
Caramanica?
Yes.
Chairwoman Beal?
Yes.
And I guess the last thing would be the site plan that's submitted, the conditions for that would be, do we need a condition that we're going to leave the playground?
No, what we would ask is that the playground area will be as presented, the play area will be as presented. We just want the flexibility to change out the equipment. I know that in the past, I've had to come back if we want to change a slide.
Yeah, we'll put it in subject to equipment to be approved by Jim and replaceable without coming back to the
Right.
Also, that you're going to give the conditions that you have the right to put a fence.
As long as it's conforming.
As long as it's conforming with material and height, subject to Jim. Height has to be conforming, 6 feet, I guess.
Well, no, in the front yard, if it extends to the front yard, it has to be 4
4
feet.
feet, so I know.
It'll conform.
It'll be conforming, but the material and stuff, okay. And was there any other conditions?
Just compliance with all the letters.
Well, yeah, the fire marshal's letter and whatnot, I'll go through those. But I don't think there's any other conditions.
Okay, but court.
No. Well, no. There weren't conditions there. Sorry, once. No. Okay, site plan, subject to those 2 things.
Okay.
I'll move for positive resolution for the site plan.
Second.
Whitman,
Yes.
Ashkenazi,
Yes.
DeGenero,
Yes.
Janeski,
Yes.
Caramanica,
Yes.
Chairwoman Deal.
Yes. Okay.
Thank you very much.
And, Mr. Steinberg, we don't need to go into executive session for anything, right? No? Okay. All in favor of adjourning? Aye?
Aye.
Aye.